There are men who rule with fists, there are men who rule with gold, and then there are men like Duke Cassian Valemont, who rule by making you believe the cold is shelter, the cage is safety, and your own doubt is the only truth worth trusting. Watch him long enough, and you'll see how control doesn't need chains when it can live inside your skull. Stay with me through this, because what breaks a man like that isn't mercy. It's the moment he realizes the prison he built has his own name carved into every stone. Winter owns Westmore Manor the way Cassian owns everything else, completely, without apology, without warmth. The northern estate sprawls across frozen acreage like a monument to permanence, all granite and ice-veined marble, every angle sharp enough to cut. Snow doesn't fall here so much as it settles into dominance, erasing roads, silencing the world beyond the iron gates. Inside, the corridors run long and merciless, lit by candelabras that throw more shadow than light. Servants move through these halls like ghosts practicing discretion, their footsteps muffled by Persian rugs thick enough to bury sound. Everything here has been designed to remind you this is a place where softness dies. Cassian Valemont, Duke of Westmore, stands at the window of his study on the manor's western flank, staring out at the expanse of white nothingness beyond the glass. He's 34 but carries himself like a man twice that, spine rigid, shoulder squared, jaw set in a line that suggests he's been clenching his teeth since childhood. His hair is dark, clipped close to military precision, and his eyes are the color of slate in winter, flat and reflective and impossible to read. He wears a charcoal suit tailored to perfection, the kind of precision that makes casual seem like weakness. Everything about him is controlled, measured, defended. He doesn't turn when the door opens behind him. Come in, Marcus. Lord Marcus Valemont enters with the ease of a man who's been granted permanent access, closing the door with a soft click that somehow carries weight. He's younger than Cassian by 3 years, handsome in the way aristocrats often are when genetics cooperate, all clean lines and inherited confidence. His smile is practiced, but not insincere, the kind that makes you think he's on your side until you realize he's only ever on his own. You wanted to see me? Cassian doesn't move from the window. She told me this morning. Marcus pauses, coat half unbuttoned, reading the room with the instinct of a man who's made survival an art form. Told you what? That she's carrying a child. The silence that follows is not shock. It's calculation wrapped in the performance of surprise. Marcus crosses the room slowly, his footsteps deliberate, stopping a few feet behind Cassian. He doesn't speak immediately. He's learned over the years that Cassian's silences are traps, that words offered too quickly become ammunition. Cassian, that's extraordinary news. Is it? Not a question. A challenge. Of course it is. An heir. The continuation of the Valemont line. This is what... Cassian turns and the movement is sharp enough to cut the sentence in half. His face is stone, but his eyes carry something darker, something that's been festering beneath discipline for hours. I can't father children, Marcus. You know this. Everyone who matters knows this. Marcus holds his gaze, and for just a fraction of a second, something flickers behind his expression, something that looks like opportunity. Cassian, medical verdicts aren't absolute. You had a fever 10 years ago. Dr. Blackwell gave you a diagnosis based on certainty. He was certain. I was 19, nearly dead from infection, and when I survived, he told me the cost. No heir, no bloodline, no future beyond myself. His voice is flat, drained of emotion, but underneath it runs a current of something raw, something that hasn't been allowed to surface in a decade. And you believed him. I had no reason not to. He was the finest physician in 3 counties. My father trusted him. I trusted him. Marcus moves closer, his tone shifting into something softer, something designed to feel like solidarity. Then perhaps the diagnosis was wrong. Perhaps the fever didn't take what he thought it did. These things happen, Cassian. Medicine isn't infallible. Cassian laughs, and it's a sound without joy, brittle and sharp. You think I haven't considered that? You think the first thing I did this morning wasn't tear through every possibility that doesn't end with the obvious? And what's the obvious? That my wife has betrayed me. The words land like a gavel. Final. Irreversible. Marcus exhales slowly, shaking his head as if the very suggestion pains him. Elowen? Cassian, she adores you. Anyone with eyes can see that. Adoration and fidelity aren't the same currency. You have no proof of infidelity. I have proof of impossibility. The rest is just variation on the same conclusion. Marcus crosses his arms, leaning back against the edge of the desk, his expression carefully neutral. So what are you going to do? Cassian returns to the window, his reflection ghostly in the glass. I'm going to protect what's mine. The name, the estate, the legacy my father built and his father before him. I won't let it be corrupted by deception. And Elowen? Cassian's jaw tightens. She stays in the East Wing, no visitors, no correspondence, until I determine what truth looks like. That's confinement. That's clarity. Marcus doesn't argue. He simply nods, as if this is the most reasonable response in the world, as if locking your wife away because she's pregnant is just another administrative decision in a long line of necessary cruelties. Do you want me to speak with her? No, I'll handle it. And if she refuses to comply? Cassian turns again, and this time his eyes are dead calm, the kind of calm that precedes violence. She won't. Marcus holds his gaze for a long moment, then nods again, pushing off the desk. I'll make sure the staff understands the new arrangements. Discretion, of course. Of course. Marcus moves toward the door, then pauses, hand on the latch. Cassian. What? Be careful. Anger makes men do things they can't undo. Cassian doesn't respond. Marcus leaves, and the door clicks shut with the finality of a crypt ceiling. Alone again, Cassian stares at his reflection in the window. The man looking back at him is a stranger wearing his face, hollowed out by certainty, armored in suspicion. He spent a decade believing he was broken, that his body had failed him in the most fundamental way a man could fail. And he'd made peace with it. He'd married Elowen knowing there would be no children, knowing the Valemont line would end with him, knowing that love, if it could be called that, would have to exist in the space where legacy used to be. And now she's shattered that peace with a single impossible claim. He closes his eyes and sees her face as it was this morning, standing in the doorway of their bedchamber. Hands folded across her stomach, eyes bright with something he couldn't name. Hope, maybe. Or defiance. I'm with child, Cassian. 4 words. That's all it took to detonate a marriage. Across the manor, in the East Wing where sunlight struggles to penetrate the heavy drapes, Lady Elowen Vale sits in a chair by the fireplace, staring into flames that do nothing to warm her. She's 27, slender and precise in the way women become when scrutiny is a constant companion. Her dark blonde hair pinned back with the kind of efficiency that suggests she's stopped caring about beauty and started focusing on survival. Her dress is deep green, high-necked, buttoned to the throat, armor disguised as propriety. She hasn't cried. She won't. Tears are a language Cassian doesn't speak, and she learned years ago that showing him vulnerability is the same as handing him a weapon. The door opens without a knock. One of the housemaids, a young woman named Clara, enters with a tray of tea and sets it on the side table without making eye contact. His Grace has requested that you remain in this wing until further notice, my lady. Elowen doesn't look up. Requested. Clara hesitates. Required, my lady. I see. Clara curtsies and retreats, the door closing behind her with a sound that feels heavier than it should. Elowen leans back in the chair, her hand drifting to her stomach, where the impossible is growing. She knows what Cassian believes. She knows the diagnosis that shaped his entire adult life, the verdict that made him a man convinced of his own inadequacy. She also knows, with the kind of certainty that doesn't require proof, that she has never betrayed him, not in thought, not in action, not once. Which means the lie isn't hers. It's his. Or rather, it's been told to him. She stands, moving to the window, looking out at the snow-covered grounds. The East Wing faces the gardens, or what used to be gardens before winter buried them. Now it's just white expanse and skeletal trees, beauty stripped down to structure. Her mind works the problem like a lock. If Cassian believes he's sterile, and he's not, then someone convinced him of a falsehood. Dr. Blackwell. The name rises in her memory like a ghost. She's heard it before, mentioned in passing during the early months of their marriage when Cassian was still pretending the past didn't matter. Blackwell was the physician who treated him after the fever, the man who delivered the diagnosis that changed everything. And then he vanished. Not died. Vanished. Retired to the continent, someone said. Or maybe it was the Americas. The details were always vague. the kind of vague that suggests intentional erasure. Elowen's fingers press against the cold glass. She's not a detective. She's not a strategist. She's a woman who married into power and learned too late that power is just fear organized into systems. But she's also a woman who reads people the way Cassian reads ledgers, and she knows when a pattern doesn't fit. Blackwell's disappearance, Cassian's certainty, Marcus's constant presence. The pieces don't connect yet, but they're starting to orbit each other. She turns from the window and crosses to the small writing desk in the corner. It's been cleared of correspondence materials, she notes. No ink, no paper, no way to reach the outside world. Cassian's version of protection looks a lot like a cage. But he's underestimated her, the way men like him always underestimate women who've learned to survive by appearing compliant. She kneels beside his desk and presses her fingers against the underside of the drawer. There, tucked into a groove she carved herself months ago, is a small silver key. She retrieves it and stands, moving to the bookshelf that lines the eastern wall. Third shelf from the top, behind a collection of poetry she knows no one ever reads. Her fingers find the hidden compartment, and the key turns with a soft click. Inside is a notebook, thin, leather-bound, filled with her handwriting, names, dates, observations, things she's noticed over the past 3 years that didn't make sense at the time, but felt important enough to record. She flips through the pages until she finds the entry from 8 months ago. Marcus asked about the physician again today. Wanted to know if Cassian had ever reconsidered Blackwell's verdict? Strange question. Why would he care unless the verdict serves him? She stares at the words, her pulse quickening. Marcus Valemont, cousin to the Duke. Second in line to the Valemont estate if Cassian dies without an heir. Second in line. The architecture of the deception starts to take shape. If Cassian believes he can't have children, and if Cassian dies, then Marcus inherits everything. The title, the land, the fortune. All he has to do is wait. Unless Cassian has a child. Unless the bloodline continues. Elowen closes the notebook slowly, her mind racing through implications like falling dominoes. Marcus has always been close to Cassian, always present, always helpful. She'd assumed it was family loyalty, the bond between men who grew up in the same world of privilege and expectation. But what if it wasn't loyalty? What if it was strategy? She returns the notebook to its hiding place and locks the compartment, her hand steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. She needs proof. She needs something concrete, something that can't be dismissed as paranoia or wifely desperation. She needs to find Dr. Blackwell, or find out what happened to him. Downstairs, in the grand dining hall, Cassian sits alone at the head of a table built to seat 30. A single place setting, a single glass of wine. The room is cathedral vast, all dark wood and ancestral portraits glaring down from the walls. His great-grandfather, his grandfather, his father. Men who built empires and crushed resistance and never once questioned whether their authority was earned or simply inherited. He picks up the glass, swirls the wine, watches the liquid catch the candlelight. He doesn't drink. He just holds it, feeling the weight, the balance, the precision of the crystal. The door at the far end of the hall opens, and Marcus enters, his footsteps echoing across the marble floor. "You should eat something." Cassian sets the glass down. "I'm not hungry." Marcus pulls out a chair several seats down, close enough to converse but far enough to respect hierarchy. "You haven't eaten all day. I'm aware. Starving yourself won't solve this." Cassian's eyes flick toward him, cold and flat. "What would you suggest, Marcus? Celebration? Champagne and cigars?" "I'd suggest clarity. You're making decisions in anger. I'm making decisions in truth. Your truth. Not necessarily the truth." Cassian leans back in his chair, studying his cousin with the kind of focus that makes smaller men confess to crimes they didn't commit. "You think she's innocent. I think you have no evidence of guilt. The pregnancy is the evidence. Only if you're certain of your own condition. I am certain. Blackwell was certain. Blackwell is gone." The statement hangs in the air, and for a moment, neither man speaks. Cassian's fingers drum once against the table, a rare tell of agitation. "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating fact. The man who diagnosed you disappeared years ago. No forwarding address, no continued practice. He made a pronouncement about your fertility and then vanished from society. Doesn't that strike you as unusual?" Cassian's jaw works. "He retired. That's what we were told." "You think he lied?" Marcus spreads his hands, the gesture almost innocent. I think medicine is fallible. I think diagnoses can be wrong. And I think you're about to destroy your marriage over information that might not be accurate. Cassian stands abruptly, the chair scraping back with a harsh sound. Then I'll find him. I'll find Blackwell, and I'll get the truth. And if the truth is that you were wrong, if the truth is that you can father children and Elowen is carrying your heir, Cassian stares at him, and something shifts in his expression. Not hope, something more dangerous. Then I've committed an unforgivable cruelty. Marcus stands as well, moving closer. Which is why you need to be careful, Cassian. This isn't about control. It's about truth. And truth doesn't care about your certainty. Cassian looks away, his hands curling into fists at his sides. I can't trust her. You can't trust yourself. The words hit like a blade, and Cassian's head snaps back toward Marcus. Get out! Marcus doesn't flinch. I'm trying to help you. I said get out! Marcus holds his gaze for another moment, then nods once, turning toward the door. He pauses at the threshold, looking back. She loves you, Cassian. Whatever else is true, that is. Cassian doesn't respond. Marcus leaves, and the silence that follows is absolute. Cassian stands in the center of the vast dining hall, surrounded by portraits of dead men who never had to question their legacies, who never had to wonder if their wives were lying, who never had to choose between love and certainty. He crosses to the fireplace, where a blaze is consuming oak logs with methodical efficiency. The heat doesn't reach him. Nothing reaches him. He's spent his entire adult life building walls, creating systems, ensuring that nothing unpredictable could ever touch the core of who he is. Control isn't just a preference for him. It's survival. It's the architecture that keeps chaos outside the gates. And Elowen just walked through every barrier like they were made of smoke. He closes his eyes and sees her again, the way she looked 3 years ago when they married. Nervous but composed, her hand trembling slightly when he placed the ring on her finger. He'd chosen her for practical reasons. Good bloodline, intelligent, capable of representing the Valemont name in social arenas that required grace instead of dominance. He hadn't expected to care about her beyond the transactional, but somewhere between political alliance and the present, something shifted. He started noticing the way she read in the library, completely absorbed, her finger tracing lines of text. The way she handled the estate staff with firmness and fairness, earning loyalty instead of demanding it. The way she looked at him, sometimes when she thought he wasn't watching, like she was trying to solve a puzzle she desperately wanted to understand. He started wanting her in ways that had nothing to do with duty. And then this morning, she looked at him with those same eyes and told him she was carrying his child. And everything he thought he knew about himself detonated. He opens his eyes and stares into the fire. If she's telling the truth, he's just destroyed the only real thing in his life. If she's lying, he's been played for a fool by the one person he allowed past his defenses. Either way, he's already lost. The next 3 days pass like a slow suffocation. Cassian throws himself into estate business, reviewing ledgers, meeting with land managers, inspecting properties that don't need inspecting. Anything to avoid the East Wing. Anything to avoid her. Marcus is everywhere, always helpful, always offering perspective that somehow makes Cassian's suspicions feel more justified. He brings news of Dr. Blackwell's last known location, a small coastal town where records suggest the physician settled before his trail goes cold. He mentions, casually, that several servants have noticed Elowen's correspondence habits in the months before her announcement, letters sent and received with unusual frequency. Every piece of information is a brick in the wall. Cassian is building between himself and his wife. On the 4th day, he breaks. He stands outside the door to her chambers, his hand on the latch, frozen between entering and retreating. He hasn't seen her since the morning she told him, hasn't spoken to her, hasn't allowed himself to think about what she might be feeling locked away in isolation. He opens the door. She's standing by the window, backlit by gray afternoon light, her posture straight, her hands folded. She doesn't turn when he enters. Have you come to accuse me again? Or is this a different kind of cruelty? Her voice is steady, no tears, no pleading, just cold observation. Cassian closes the door behind him. I came to talk. Now she turns, and the look in her eyes isn't what he expected. It's not fear, it's not even anger. It's disappointment, and somehow that's worse. Talk. As if we're equals. As if you haven't turned me into a prisoner in my own home. This is about protecting Don't. Don't you dare finish that sentence with something noble. This is about control. This is about you being so terrified of vulnerability that you'd rather believe I'm a liar than face the possibility that you were wrong. Cassian's hands clench. I was told I couldn't father children. By a physician my family trusted. By a man who had no reason to lie. And I'm telling you, I've never been with another man. Not before you, not during our marriage, not ever. But my word means nothing because it doesn't fit your certainty. She moves toward him, and he has to fight the instinct to step back. You know what the worst part is, Cassian? It's not the confinement. It's not even the accusation. It's that you looked at me, at us, at 3 years of building something real, and you didn't hesitate. You didn't question your own assumptions. You just locked me away like I was already guilty. Because the alternative is impossible. No, the alternative is uncomfortable. There's a difference. She's close enough now that he can see the faint shadows under her eyes, the tension in her jaw, the way her hands are trembling despite her steady voice. If you can't trust me, Cassian, then we have nothing. Not a marriage. Not a partnership. Nothing. He wants to reach for her. He wants to pull her close and tell her he's sorry, that he's terrified, that the idea of being wrong about himself is more devastating than the idea of her betrayal, because at least betrayal he understands. But he doesn't move. I need proof. She laughs, and it's a sound like breaking glass. Of what? My fidelity? How do I prove a negative? How do I prove I didn't do something? Then I need proof that Blackwell was wrong. She stares at him for a long moment, and something shifts in her expression. Something that looks like resolve. Then find him. Find your precious doctor and get your proof. But while you're hunting ghosts, know this. I'm not waiting. I'm not sitting in this wing like some medieval prisoner hoping my husband remembers I'm human. I'm going to find the truth myself. You're confined to... I'm confined to nothing. You want to lock me up? You'll have to post guards. And we both know how that will look to the servants, to the county, to everyone who's supposed to believe the Duke of Westmore runs his household with honor. Cassian's voice drops, dangerous and low. Don't test me, Elowen. Or what? You'll do worse than you've already done? You've already treated me like a criminal. What's left? She turns away from him, returning to the window, her back a wall of dismissal. Leave, Cassian. Come back when you've decided whether you're my husband or my warden. He stands there, fury and something else warring in his chest, and then he does the only thing he knows how to do. He leaves. The door closes behind him, and Elowen's shoulders finally drop, the armor cracking just enough to let exhaustion through. But she doesn't cry. She doesn't allow it. Instead, she crosses to the writing desk and pulls out the notebook again, flipping to a blank page. She starts writing names, connections, questions. Dr. Horace Blackwell. Last known location, undetermined. Disappeared approximately 9 years ago. Marcus Valemont. Second in line. Benefits from Cassian's lack of heir. Financial records. Where would Cassian keep documentation of physician payments? The safe. His study. The iron safe behind the portrait of his father. She knows about the safe. She's seen him open it twice, both times when he thought she wasn't paying attention. The key is hidden somewhere in the study. She's certain of it. Cassian is a creature of pattern, and his patterns are readable if you watch long enough. She needs to get into that study. She needs to see what he's been keeping locked away. That night, while the manor sleeps under fresh snowfall, Elowen moves through the corridors like a shadow learning to be solid. She's memorized the servants' schedules, the creaking floorboards, the blind spots in the candlelight. The east wing connects to the main house through a servant's passage, rarely used, barely maintained. She finds it behind a tapestry in the dressing room, the door barely visible unless you know where to look. The passage is narrow and cold, smelling of dust and neglect. She follows it with her hand against the wall, counting steps, until she emerges in the lower pantry. From there, it's a straight path to the western corridor, to Cassian's study. The door is locked, but she expected that. She also expected that Cassian, for all his control, keeps a spare key in the same place his father did, inside the carved wooden box on the hall table, hidden among cufflinks and forgotten pocket watches. The key turns silently, and she slips inside, closing the door behind her. The study is exactly as she remembers. Massive desk, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, the portrait of the old Duke glaring down from above the fireplace, and behind it, she knows, the safe. She crosses the room, her heart hammering but her hands steady. The portrait is heavy, but it swings aside on hidden hinges, revealing the iron safe embedded in the wall. The key. She needs the key. She starts searching. Desk drawers, ledgers, correspondence. Nothing that looks like a safe key. Bookshelves. First editions, law texts, nothing. The mantle, a clock, a silver box, there. Beneath the marble bust of some long-dead Valemont ancestor, a small drawer she almost missed. She slides it open, and inside, wrapped in velvet, is a single iron key. Her fingers close around it. The safe opens with a well-oiled click, and inside she finds exactly what she feared and hoped for: medical records. Dozens of pages, all stamped with Dr. Horace Blackwell's seal. She pulls them out, her eyes scanning the handwriting, the dates, the diagnoses. And there it is. The written record states clearly, patient shows full recovery from febrile illness, all systems normal, reproductive capacity unaffected. But clipped to it is a separate note, in different handwriting: informed patient of permanent sterility resulting from fever complications. Patient advised to consider estate succession alternatives. The diagnosis he was given doesn't match the medical reality. Someone lied to Cassian. Someone told him he was sterile when the written evidence says otherwise. She keeps searching, and beneath the medical files she finds financial records, trust documents, payments made to a legal firm she doesn't recognize. And there, in the margin of one document, a name that makes her blood go cold. Marcus Valemont, beneficiary. The structure assembles itself in her mind with brutal clarity. Marcus needed Cassian to believe he was sterile. Marcus needed the Valemont line to end. Marcus needed to be next in succession. And to ensure that, he paid someone, Blackwell or someone connected to him, to deliver a false diagnosis and then disappear before the lie could be exposed. She's holding the proof of a decade-long deception, and the man who orchestrated it has been standing beside Cassian the entire time, whispering poison disguised as counsel. A sound in the hallway. Footsteps. Elowen's pulse spikes. She shoves the documents back into the safe, locks it, replaces the portrait, pockets the key. The study door is opening. She has nowhere to hide. Cassian enters, and freezes when he sees her. For 3 seconds, neither of them moves. Then his eyes drop to her hand, to the iron key she's still holding, and understanding crashes across his face like a wave breaking against stone. "What are you doing in here?" Not a question. An accusation wrapped in barely controlled fury. Elowen doesn't flinch, finding the truth you're too terrified to look for. His hand is on the door latch, and for a moment she thinks he might slam it, might call for guards, might finally cross the line from cruelty into violence. Instead, he steps inside and closes the door quietly. "Show me." She holds his gaze, measuring the distance between anger and openness, between certainty and doubt. Then she crosses to the portrait, swings it aside, and opens the safe again with the key she's not supposed to have. She pulls out the medical records and hands them to him without a word. Cassian reads. The room is silent except for the rustle of paper and the sound of a man's entire reality crumbling. When he finishes, his face is pale, his hands shaking. This says that you were never sterile, that someone told you a lie and made sure the evidence supported it, that you've spent 10 years believing you were broken when you were whole the entire time. She watches him process it, watches the architecture of his certainty collapse room by room. Who? His voice is barely audible. She shows him the financial records, the trust, the payments. Marcus's name. Cassian stares at the documents, and something in his eyes goes very still, very cold. Not the cold of winter, the cold of execution. Where is he? In the guest wing. He's been staying here since... Cassian is already moving toward the door. Elowen grabs his arm. Wait. If you confront him now, in rage, he'll twist it. He's been doing this for years. He's good at this. Cassian looks at her hand on his arm, then at her face, and for the first time in days, she sees him actually see her. What do you suggest? Proof. We need him to confess. We need witnesses. We need it to be undeniable. How? She takes a breath. He doesn't know I found this. He doesn't know you know, which means he still thinks he's winning. And men who think they're winning get careless. Cassian's jaw works. You want to set a trap. I want to give him enough rope to hang himself with. But we have to be smart. We have to be careful. He stares at her for a long moment, and something shifts in the space between them. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But recognition. I'm sorry. The words are raw, unpracticed, like he's speaking a language he's never learned. Elowen's throat tightens, but she doesn't look away. I know, she releases his arm. But sorry doesn't fix this. Truth does. He nods once, and in that gesture is the beginning of something that might eventually look like trust. Together, they begin to plan. And in the guest wing, Marcus Valemont pours himself a glass of brandy and smiles at his reflection in the window, completely unaware that the foundation of his entire strategy has just been ripped out from under him. The thing about traps is they require patience, and patience is what men like Cassian Valemont have spent their entire lives building into muscle memory. Control isn't spontaneous, it's deliberate. It's waiting until the moment is perfect, and then executing with surgical precision. But here's what most people don't understand about that kind of discipline. It's not strength. It's fear dressed up in expensive tailoring. Fear that if you move too soon, if you show your hand before the deck is stacked, everything you've built will collapse. And right now, standing in his study with his wife holding evidence that his entire adult identity was manufactured by the man he trusted most. Cassian is learning that fear has a twin sister called rage, and she doesn't wait for permission. He stands there with the medical records in his hands, reading them for the third time, like repetition will change the words, like somehow the diagnosis will shift back to the lie if he just stares hard enough. But the paper doesn't care about his certainty. The ink is permanent. The truth is absolute. He was never sterile. The fever didn't take anything from him except the will to question authority, and someone weaponized that compliance into a decade of manufactured shame. Elowen watches him from across the room, her back against the bookshelf, arms crossed, not in defense, but in observation. She's learned to read him the way you read weather patterns, looking for the shift between storm systems, the moment when pressure becomes precipitation. His jaw is working, that tiny muscle below his ear pulsing in rhythm with whatever violence he's swallowing back. His hands are steady, though, and that's worse somehow. Steady hands mean he's thinking, calculating, planning the kind of retribution that doesn't announce itself with fists. We need him to confess. Cassian's voice is flat, scraped clean of emotion, which means the emotion is just being stored somewhere deeper. He won't confess to an accusation. He'll deflect. He's been doing this too long to break under pressure. Elowen pushes off the bookshelf, moving closer but maintaining distance, that careful geography of not quite trust. Then we make him think he's already won. We make him believe you're about to do exactly what he wants, which is annul the marriage, declare the child illegitimate, name him your heir. Cassian's eyes snap to hers, and for a second the mask cracks enough to show the wound underneath. You want me to publicly destroy you. I want you to make him think you're destroying me. There's a difference. She crosses to the desk, leaning against it with the kind of casual confidence that comes from knowing you're already standing in the wreckage, so what's left to fear? Marcus thinks he's controlling this narrative. He thinks every move you make is a result of his whispers. So we give him what he expects. You call a formal meeting, the family solicitor. Estate witnesses. You announce your intention to dissolve the marriage based on infidelity. And Marcus will be there. Marcus will be there because he can't afford not to be. This is the culmination of everything he's worked for. He'll want to witness it. He'll want to make sure it's done correctly. Cassian sets the records down on the desk, his fingers pressing against the wood hard enough that his knuckles go white. And when he's comfortable, when he thinks it's finished, we show him the medical records. We show everyone the medical records. We make him explain how a physician diagnosed you with something the written documentation contradicts. We make him explain the financial connection. We make him confess or damn himself trying to lie his way out. It's elegant in its cruelty, and Cassian recognizes the architecture because it's the same system he's used his entire life. Create a scenario where the opponent has only one move, then make that move their execution. He looks at her, really looks at her, and sees something he's been too armored to notice before. She's not soft. She never was. She just let him believe protection and possession were the same thing because it was easier than fighting about the difference. You've been planning this. Not a question. I've been surviving this. There's a difference. She straightens, smoothing her dress with hands that don't shake anymore, that learned steadiness the same way he learned control, through necessity. I spent 3 days locked in the East Wing being treated like a criminal for the crime of being pregnant with your child. So yes, Cassian, I've been planning, I've been watching, I've been learning exactly how much I can trust my husband to choose truth over certainty. And so far, the score isn't in your favor. The words land like stones in water, and the ripples spread through the silence between them. Cassian wants to argue, wants to defend his actions as reasonable given the information he had, but the defense dies in his throat because what information did he have? A decade-old diagnosis he never questioned and a cousin whose every suggestion pushed him further from his wife and closer to isolation. He was played. Perfectly. Completely. And the man who did it is sleeping 4 doors down the hall, probably dreaming about inheritance documents and estate titles that come with his name at the top. Tomorrow morning. I'll send word to the solicitor tonight. Family meeting at 10. Elowen nods once. All business. No relief. I'll stay in the East Wing until then. It needs to look real. Cassian's hand moves toward her, an aborted gesture that doesn't know if it's reaching or retreating. Elowen, don't. Don't apologize again. Not yet. You want to make this right? You do it with action. Words are cheap, and I'm done accepting currency that doesn't spend. She walks past him, toward the door, and pauses with her hand on the latch. One more thing. When this happens, when we expose him, it's going to get ugly. Marcus isn't going to go quietly. Men like him don't. They burn the house down rather than lose it. Cassian meets her eyes, and what passes between them isn't forgiveness, but something raw, something that looks like soldiers acknowledging they're in the same war. Let him try. She leaves, and Cassian stands alone in the study, surrounded by evidence of his own blindness. The portraits on the walls watch him with dead eyes that saw everything and changed nothing. Legacy. Bloodline. Honor. The words his father worshipped and his grandfather weaponized and he internalized until they became the bars of a cage he built himself. He crosses to the window, looking out at the snow-covered grounds lit by moonlight that makes everything look clean and simple and untrue. Somewhere out there, beyond the estate borders, is a world that doesn't operate on aristocratic certainty, where men don't inherit authority and women aren't property disguised as partnership. But he's never lived in that world. He's only lived here, in this manner of marble and silence, where power is the only language spoken fluently. And power, he's learning, is just fear that learned to stand up straight. The next morning breaks cold and precise, the kind of winter day that feels like a blade wrapped in white. Cassian hasn't slept. He spent the hours before dawn composing the letter to his solicitor, each word chosen with the care of a man defusing a bomb. The message is simple: formal meeting to address matters of succession and marital dissolution. Witnesses required. Attendance mandatory. He sends it by courier at dawn, then dresses with the same methodical attention he'd give to armor before battle. Charcoal suit, pressed shirt, cufflinks that belong to his father. The uniform of authority. Marcus finds him in the breakfast room at 8, looking fresh and concerned in equal measure, the performance so practiced it's almost art. I heard you sent for the solicitor. Is everything all right? Cassian doesn't look up from his coffee. It will be. Marcus pulls out a chair, sitting without invitation, the presumption of family privilege. Cassian, if this is about yesterday, about our conversation, this is about clarity. You were right. I need to stop making decisions in anger and start making them with purpose. Marcus leans back, and if you weren't watching for it, you'd miss the flash of satisfaction that crosses his expression. I'm glad you're seeing reason. What have you decided? Cassian finally looks at him, and his face is stone. That the marriage cannot continue under these circumstances. That the child, regardless of its origins, cannot be recognized as my heir. That the Valemont line requires protection from uncertainty. Marcus nods slowly, like he's processing information he definitely already calculated. That's a difficult decision, but probably the right one. For the estate, for the legacy, for everything my father built. Exactly. Cassian stands, setting his coffee down with a sound like punctuation. I've called a formal meeting for 10. You should be there. As family. As next in line. Marcus's eyes flicker with something that might be triumph if it had less discipline. Of course. Whatever you need. Cassian walks past him without another word, leaving Marcus alone at the breakfast table with a smile he doesn't bother hiding anymore. In the East Wing, Elowen stands in front of the mirror, studying her reflection like it's evidence in a trial. She looks pale, thinner than she was a week ago, the confinement showing in the shadows under her eyes and the tension in her jaw. but her hands are steady when she pins her hair back, and her spine is straight when she fastens the buttons on a dress the color of deep water, dark enough to be mourning, blue enough to be defiance. There's a knock at the door. Clara enters with a breakfast tray, her eyes downcast in that careful way servants develop when they know too much. His Grace requests your presence in the library at 10. My lady. Elowen doesn't turn from the mirror. Tell His Grace I'll be there. Clara sets the tray down and hesitates at the door. My lady, if I may... You may not. The words are gentle but absolute. Clara curtsies and leaves. Elowen picks up the teacup, watches the steam rise and dissipate, thinks about how trust evaporates just as easily when heat is applied. She's about to walk into a room full of men who've spent their lives deciding women's fates without consulting the women themselves, and she's going to watch her husband perform a dissolution of their marriage that needs to look real enough to convince a man who's been orchestrating this outcome for years. The thing about performance is you have to believe it while you're doing it, or the audience sees through the mask. And Marcus is the most dangerous kind of audience, the kind that's been writing the script himself. She drinks the tea, sets the cup down, walks to the door. The library at Westmore Manor is a cathedral to inherited knowledge. 3 stories of leather-bound certainty rising toward a vaulted ceiling painted with mythological scenes of gods punishing hubris. The irony isn't lost on Elowen as she enters at precisely 10 o'clock, escorted by a footman who treats her like she's already a ghost. Cassian stands at the head of a long table, his solicitor, Mr. Harwick, beside him, a thin man with wire-frame glasses and the expression of someone who's seen too many family fortunes dissolve into litigation. Marcus is seated to Cassian's right, playing the concerned cousin with award-worthy subtlety. 2 estate witnesses, senior household staff, stand against the far wall, their faces carefully neutral. Elowen takes her place at the opposite end of the table, the geography of the room already a verdict. Cassian doesn't look at her. That's the first cut. We're here to address a matter of succession and the legitimacy of inheritance as it pertains to the Valemont estate. His voice is formal, drained of anything personal, and it's perfect. It's exactly what Marcus needs to hear. Mr. Harwick clears his throat, adjusting papers that don't need adjusting. Your Grace, perhaps we should discuss this in private without my wife? No, she should hear this. She's entitled to that much. Elowen keeps her expression blank, but her hands fold in her lap, fingers interlaced tight enough to hurt. Cassian continues, and every word is a stone added to the architecture of the trap. 3 days ago, the Duchess informed me she is with child. Under normal circumstances, this would be cause for celebration. An heir. The continuation of the bloodline. However, circumstances are not normal. Marcus leans forward slightly, the body language of investment. 10 years ago, I was diagnosed by Dr. Horace Blackwell as incapable of fathering children. The diagnosis followed a severe fever that nearly killed me. I was informed the damage was permanent and irreversible. Mr. Harwick's pen scratches against paper, documenting the end of a marriage. Given this medical certainty, the Duchess's pregnancy presents an impossibility that can only be explained by one conclusion. The child she carries is not mine. Elowen's breath doesn't change. She's practiced this. She's ready. You've decided I'm guilty without investigation, without evidence. Her voice is measured, not pleading, which makes it more devastating. Cassian finally looks at her, and the coldness in his expression is so complete it almost breaks her resolve. The evidence is biological. The rest is just detail. Marcus shifts in his chair, and if you knew what to watch for, you'd see the satisfaction leaking through his concern. Cassian, I know this is painful, but you're doing the right thing. The estate must be protected. Cassian nods, returning his attention to Harwick. I'm requesting documentation for annulment on grounds of adultery. The child will not be recognized as legitimate heir to the Valemont title or estate. Succession will proceed according to established bloodline. Which means, Mr. Harwick says carefully, that Lord Marcus Valemont would be named heir designate in the absence of legitimate issue. Marcus performs reluctance beautifully. Cassian, you don't have to decide this now. Take time. Consider... No. It's decided. The room settles into the kind of silence that feels like gravity increasing. And that's when Elowen makes her move. Before we finalize anything, I'd like the court to review additional evidence. She stands, pulling a folded document from inside her sleeve, and the movement is so smooth it's clear she's been planning this exact moment. Cassian's eyes flash with something that might be warning or might be approval. The Duchess has no standing to introduce evidence in a matter of... She's accused. She has every standing. Cassian's interruption cuts Harwick off, and the solicitor blinks in confusion because this isn't the script he was following. Elowen walks the length of the table, her footsteps the only sound, and places the document in front of Harwick. Medical records. From Dr. Horace Blackwell. The complete file regarding the Duke's diagnosis. Harwick unfolds the pages, his eyes scanning, and his expression shifts from bureaucratic neutrality to something closer to confusion. Your Grace, this documentation states that your reproductive capacity was unaffected by the fever. There's no diagnosis of sterility here. Marcus goes very still. Cassian leans forward, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet. Read the attached note. Harwick finds it, reads aloud. Informed patient of permanent sterility resulting from fever complications. Patient advised to consider estate succession alternatives. He looks up. This note contradicts the medical findings. The written diagnosis says one thing, but the patient was told another. Elowen's voice cuts through the confusion like a knife finding ribs. Someone lied to the Duke. Someone told him he was sterile when the medical evidence says otherwise. Someone needed him to believe he couldn't have children. Marcus stands abruptly, his chair scraping back. This is absurd. You're suggesting Dr. Blackwell falsified. I'm suggesting someone paid Dr. Blackwell to deliver a false diagnosis and then helped him disappear before questions could be asked. She pulls out the second document, the financial records, and slides them across the table. Trust payments. Routed through a legal firm connected to the Blackwell estate. Beneficiary listed as Marcus Valemont. The room detonates into silence. Marcus's face cycles through denial, outrage, calculation, landing somewhere between all three. This is fabrication. You've manufactured this to save yourself from what? From being accused of infidelity by a husband who was lied to for a decade? From carrying a child that is his despite being told it's impossible? Her voice rises, not to volume, but to intensity. You needed Cassian to believe he was broken. You needed the Valemont line to end with him. You needed to be next in succession. So you paid a physician to lie, you made sure he vanished, and you've spent 10 years whispering in Cassian's ear, making sure he never questioned the diagnosis. That's insane. I would never... Then explain the payments. Cassian's voice is so cold it could frost glass. Explain why your name appears on financial documents connected to the man who diagnosed me. Explain why you've been so helpful in pushing me toward annulment. Explain why every piece of advice you've given me in the past week has moved me further from my wife and closer to naming you my heir. Marcus looks between them, and you can see him calculating exits, weighing options, trying to find a version of this that doesn't end with exposure. This is conspiracy. The two of you have constructed this narrative to what, Marcus? To trick you into confessing to something you didn't do? Cassian stands now, moving around the table with the slow deliberation of a predator that's already established dominance. You've been in this house for 3 years. Longer if we count childhood visits. You've watched me build this estate, manage these holdings, carry the weight of a legacy I thought would die with me. And the entire time you were waiting, planning, making sure I never questioned the one thing that would ruin everything you worked for. I've done nothing but support you. You've done nothing but manipulate me. The space between them shrinks until they're close enough that violence is just a decision away. Cassian's voice drops to barely above a whisper, and it's more terrifying than shouting. Did you know about the child before she told me? Marcus's eyes flicker. Did you know that medical science might be wrong? That maybe I wasn't sterile? And you needed to act fast before an heir ruined 10 years of positioning yourself for inheritance? I don't have to listen to... Yes, you do. Because there are witnesses here, because there's documentation, because the only way out of this room for you is through the truth. Marcus's jaw works, his hands clenched at his sides, and for a long moment it looks like he might actually confess, might actually crack under the pressure of being cornered by evidence and exposure. Instead, he laughs. It's not a sound of humor. It's the sound of a man who's realized he's already lost, but hasn't decided whether to burn the house down on his way out. You want truth, cousin? Fine. Here's truth. Yes, I paid Blackwell. Yes, I made sure you believed you were sterile. And yes, I've spent a decade positioning myself as your successor because you were never going to produce an heir on your own. You were too broken, too controlled, too convinced that discipline and authority were substitutes for actually living. The confession spills out like poison, and everyone in the room freezes. You think this is about inheritance? This is about competence. You've run this estate like a military installation. You've treated people like resources. You married a woman and kept her at arm's length because intimacy terrified you more than isolation. You were never going to have children because you were never going to let anyone close enough to make that possible. Cassian doesn't move, doesn't react, just absorbs the words like they're ammunition he'll use later. So yes, I helped that along. I made sure your medical certainty matched your emotional reality. And it would have worked perfectly if your wife hadn't decided to complicate things by actually getting pregnant. He turns to Elowen, and his expression is pure contempt. Which, by the way, is either a miracle or proof that you found comfort elsewhere. I haven't decided which. Elowen's voice is steel. The child is his. The medical records prove he's capable. Your entire strategy was built on a lie that's now exposed. You've confessed to fraud and conspiracy in front of witnesses. You're finished. Marcus's laugh returns, sharper this time. Finished? You think this ends me? I'm second in line to one of the most powerful estates in the country. I have connections, resources, legal protections. This is your word against mine, and I'm very good at making my words sound reasonable. Mr. Harwick clears his throat, and his voice carries the weight of legal certainty. Actually, Lord Valemont, it's not just their word. I've documented this entire conversation. The confession, the admission of payment to falsify medical records, the acknowledgement of conspiracy to manipulate inheritance. This is admissible testimony, and it's witnessed by estate staff who have no incentive to lie. Marcus's expression finally cracks, the mask shattering to reveal something desperate underneath. You can't do this. Cassian, we're family. We grew up together. I was protecting the estate. I was ensuring continuity. Everything I did was for the Valemont legacy. Cassian's voice, when it comes, is emptied of everything except finality. You weren't protecting the legacy, you were stealing it, and you used my trust as the weapon. He nods to the footman standing by the door. Escort Lord Valemont to the guest wing. He's to be confined there until authorities can be summoned to address charges of fraud and conspiracy. Marcus doesn't resist, but his eyes never leave Cassian's face. You're making a mistake. She's manipulating you. She got pregnant somehow, and now she's twisting everything to make me look guilty so you won't question where that child actually came from. The footmen move forward, taking Marcus by the arms with firm but respectful grips. As they lead him toward the door, Marcus calls back over his shoulder. Ask her, Cassian. Ask her who else had access to her chambers. Ask her who else she trusted during those 3 months you were away inspecting the northern holdings. Ask her about the letters she burned. The door closes on his voice, cutting the accusation off mid-sentence. Silence floods the library like water filling a sinking ship. Cassian turns to Elowen, and the question in his eyes is loud even without words. She meets his gaze and her voice is steady. I burned letters from my sister. She was asking about financial help for her husband's debts. I didn't want you to feel obligated to assist family that wasn't yours. That's what I burned. She pauses. And you were gone for 3 months last year, yes. I spent that time managing the household, corresponding with estate managers, and reading in the library. Alone. The way I spent most of our marriage. The words carry weight that has nothing to do with Marcus's accusations and everything to do with truth that's been waiting to be spoken. Cassian nods once, and whatever test just happened, she passed it. Mr. Harwick gathers his papers with the efficiency of a man who suddenly has a lot of legal documentation to prepare. Your Grace, I'll need to file formal charges. The authorities will want statements from all witnesses. This will become public. Cassian doesn't flinch. Let it. The truth doesn't need privacy. Harwick nods and withdraws, the estate witnesses following him out, leaving Cassian and Elowen alone in the cathedral of inherited knowledge. They stand at opposite ends of the table, the same geography as when the meeting started, but the distance feels different now, less like judgment and more like aftermath. Elowen speaks first. He's not entirely wrong. About what? About you keeping me at distance. About control being easier than intimacy. About the estate running like a military installation. Cassian's hands press flat against the table. No, he's not wrong about that. She moves around the table, slowly, each step deliberate. But he was wrong about the child. Wrong about my fidelity. Wrong about you never being able to have an heir. I know. Do you? Because 3 days ago you locked me away based on certainty that turned out to be manufactured. You believed his whispers over my word. You chose the lie that made you victim over the truth that made you whole. She's close enough now that he can see the exhaustion in her eyes, the cost of fighting to be believed. I don't know how to trust you again, Cassian. I don't know if I even want to. He takes the hit without defending, because what defense exists for the indefensible? I was taught that control prevents chaos, that distance prevents pain, that if you hold everything tight enough, nothing can break. And I was wrong. I didn't prevent pain. I just ensured I'd be alone when it came. His voice cracks on the last word. The first time she's ever heard discipline fail him. The child is mine. Yes. And you never betrayed me. Never. He closes his eyes, and when he opens them again, they're wet. I don't know how to fix this. Elowen's hand reaches across the space between them, not touching him, but offering the possibility. You start by choosing truth even when certainty feels safer. You start by trusting that intimacy isn't weakness. You start by understanding that legacy isn't just bloodline and estate holdings. It's what you build with the people who choose to stay. Her hand hovers there, waiting. I'm choosing to stay, Cassian, not because you deserve it, not because the estate requires it, because I still believe there's a man under all that armor who's capable of being something other than afraid. Cassian looks at her hand like it's salvation and condemnation wrapped together, and after what feels like centuries compressed into seconds, he reaches out and takes it. Their fingers interlace, and it's not forgiveness. It's not even reconciliation. It's just two people who've survived deception choosing to face what comes next without certainty as their compass. Outside the library windows, snow begins to fall again, covering the estate in fresh layers of white that make everything look clean until you look closer and see the structure underneath. Here's what they don't tell you about winning. It's the moment right before everything you thought was solid turns to smoke. You think you've identified the enemy, exposed the conspiracy, reclaimed control of the narrative. You think the hard part is over. That's when the ground opens up beneath you, and you realize the trap you saw was just the one they wanted you to find. The real trap was always somewhere else, built by someone you never thought to suspect, waiting for the exact moment when you felt safe enough to stop watching your back. The authorities arrive at Westmore Manor 3 hours after Marcus's confession. 2 constables from the county seat and a magistrate named Aldridge, who carries himself with the exhausted authority of a man who's seen too many aristocratic families destroy themselves from within. They take statements in the drawing room while Marcus remains confined to the guest wing, his protests echoing down the corridors like the sound of legacy crumbling. Cassian stands by the window watching snow accumulate on the grounds, each flake another layer of burial for whatever he thought this day would resolve. Elowen sits in a chair near the fire, her hands folded over her stomach in a gesture that's become unconscious protection. The child growing inside her is the reason for all of this, the impossible proof that unraveled a decade of deception, and she finds herself wondering what kind of world this child will inherit when everything their parents believed turned out to be manufactured. Mr. Harwick speaks with Magistrate Aldridge in low tones, passing documents back and forth, the medical records and financial statements that comprise the architecture of Marcus's betrayal. The magistrate's expression doesn't change as he reads, trained neutrality that makes verdict impossible to predict. Finally, Aldridge looks up, removing his spectacles with the deliberation of a man about to deliver something unpleasant. Your Grace, the documentation is compelling. The confession, witnessed and recorded, provides clear evidence of conspiracy to defraud. However, there are complications. Cassian turns from the window. What complications? The financial records you've provided show payments to a legal firm, yes, but the firm in question handles dozens of trusts and estates. The connection to Dr. Blackwell is circumstantial without direct testimony from the physician himself. He's disappeared. That's the point. Marcus made sure he disappeared. Aldridge nods slowly. Which brings us to the second complication. Lord Varemont's legal counsel has already filed a counterclaim suggesting that the medical records were altered, that the discrepancy between written diagnosis and verbal communication was a clerical error, and that his payments to the legal firm were for unrelated estate planning purposes. Elowen's voice cuts through the formality like a blade through silk. He confessed. In front of witnesses. He admitted to paying Blackwell to falsify the diagnosis. He admitted to making payments, yes, but his counsel is arguing that the confession was coerced, given under duress, and that the true conspiracy is between yourself and the Duke to eliminate him from succession. The room temperature drops 10 degrees. Cassian's hands curl into fists at his sides. That's insane. That's strategy, Your Grace. And it's effective strategy. Without Dr. Blackwell's testimony confirming he was paid to lie, without concrete proof that the payments were specifically for medical fraud rather than legitimate legal services, the case becomes a matter of competing narratives. So, what are you saying? Aldridge sets the documents down with the finality of a gavel. I'm saying that while I personally believe your account, belief isn't sufficient for legal action. Lord Valemont will likely face charges, but they'll be reduced. Financial impropriety rather than conspiracy. A fine rather than imprisonment. And he'll retain his position in the succession unless you can produce evidence that definitively proves intent to defraud. Cassian moves toward the magistrate with the kind of controlled violence that makes men who understand power take a step back. He manipulated my entire adult life. He manufactured a medical condition to prevent me from having an heir. He positioned himself to inherit everything my family built. And you're telling me the law considers this a financial impropriety? I'm telling you the law requires proof, Your Grace. Confession under duress isn't sufficient. The medical records show discrepancy, but not definitively who created that discrepancy or why. The payments exist, but purpose is arguable. Without Blackwell's testimony, you don't have a case that survives legal challenge. Find Blackwell, then. Aldridge's expression shifts to something closer to pity. We've been trying, Your Grace. Dr. Horace Blackwell disappeared 9 years ago. No death certificate, no forwarding address, no records of continued practice anywhere in the kingdom or the continent. The man is a ghost, and ghosts don't testify. The silence that follows is the sound of victory rotting from the inside. Elowyn stands, her movement drawing every eye in the room. So Marcus walks away. He admits to conspiracy, and he walks away. Not quite walks away, my lady. He'll face charges. He'll pay fines. His reputation will suffer. But without definitive proof, he retains legal standing in the succession, and more importantly, he retains his freedom. Cassian's voice is dead calm, the kind of calm that precedes hurricanes. How long? How long what, Your Grace? How long until he's released from confinement? Aldridge glances at the constables, who shift uncomfortably. Given the nature of the charges and his cooperation with the investigation, probably this evening. He'll be required to remain in the county pending trial, but confinement isn't legally justified without stronger evidence. This evening, Cassian repeats it like he's learning a new language, where justice means something entirely different than he thought. Aldridge gathers his papers, and the constables move toward the door with the relief of men escaping a collapsing building. Your Grace, I understand your frustration. If new evidence emerges, contact me immediately. Until then, my hands are bound by what the law permits. They leave, and the drawing room empties until it's just Cassian and Elowyn and Mr. Harwick, who looks like he aged a decade in the past hour. Your Grace, there may be civil remedies available. We could pursue— No, Cassian's voice is flat. No lawsuits. No drawn-out legal battles that turn this into public spectacle. Marcus wanted inheritance, and he came close enough to taste it. That needs to be enough consequence. But Your Grace, he manipulated. I know what he did, and I know what the law says I can't prove. We're done here, Harwick. The solicitor bows and withdraws, leaving Cassian and Elowyn alone in a room that suddenly feels too large and too cold. Elowyn moves to the sideboard, pours 2 glasses of brandy, brings one to Cassian. He takes it, but doesn't drink, just holds it like he's forgotten what hands are for. He's going to be released tonight. Yes. And he'll still be in the succession, until I have children, legitimate children, which now, apparently, is possible. He finally drinks, the brandy burning down his throat without warmth. We exposed him. We proved he lied. And it doesn't matter because the system protects men like him as long as they're clever enough to leave room for reasonable doubt. Elowyn sets her glass down untouched. So what now? Now we wait for the child. We establish the heir. We make sure Marcus is never in a position to inherit. And we live with the fact that truth and justice aren't the same currency. That's not enough. It's all the law permits. She looks at him, and there's something in her expression that he can't quite read. The law. Always the law. Always what's permitted versus what's right. We can't operate outside, can't we? Marcus did. For 10 years, he operated outside every rule of decency and family loyalty, and he nearly succeeded. The only reason he didn't is because I broke into your study and found evidence you were too controlled to look for yourself. Cassian sets the glass down hard enough that Crystal protests. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that maybe control and discipline and following proper channels is exactly what men like Marcus count on. They operate in the margins while we operate in the center, and they win because we're too rigid to bend. You want revenge. I want protection. For me. For our child. For any future we might actually have. And I don't trust that the legal system provides that when Marcus is released tonight with nothing but a fine and damaged reputation. Cassian studies her, seeing something he's never noticed before. She's not soft. She's not fragile. She survived 3 years of isolation and a marriage to a man who confused possession with partnership. And she's learned that survival requires flexibility that looks like weakness until you realize it's actually strategy. What did you have in mind? Before she can answer, there's a knock at the door. One of the housemaids, young and terrified, enters with a curtsy that's almost a collapse. Your Grace, my lady, I apologize for the interruption, but there's been an incident. What kind of incident? The maid's hands twist in her apron. Lord Valemont, Your Grace. He's collapsed in his guest wing. The physician has been summoned, but he's asking for you. Cassian and Elowin exchange a glance, and without words, they move as one toward the door. The guest wing feels like a different manor entirely, all dark wood and portraits of ancestors who never quite achieved the prominence of the main line. Marcus is in bed, propped against pillows, his face the color of parchment. Dr. Whitmore, the estate physician, stands beside him with an expression that suggests he's already written the diagnosis in his mind. Cassian enters first, Elowin behind him, and Marcus's eyes track their movement with an intensity that doesn't match his physical state. Cassian, cousin, you came. His voice is weak, threaded with pain, and for a moment Cassian feels something almost like concern before he remembers the past week and hardens against it. What happened? Dr. Whitmore clears his throat. Lord Valemont appears to be suffering from acute abdominal distress, severe cramping, rapid pulse, perspiration. I've administered laudanum for the pain, but the cause is unclear. Marcus's hand reaches out, trembling. Cassian, I need to tell you something. Before it's too late. Too late for what? Marcus's breathing is labored, each word seeming to cost him. I lied about the confession, not about paying Blackwell. That was true. But the reason I did it. He coughs, a wet sound that makes Whitmore frown. You did it to position yourself for inheritance. We know this. No, that was part of it, yes, but not all. Cassian, there's someone else. Someone who needed you sterile more than I did. The room tilts slightly, reality shifting under weight it wasn't designed to carry. Who? Marcus's eyes slide past Cassian to Elowin, and something passes across his expression that might be triumph or might be pain, impossible to distinguish. Ask your wife about Dr. Whitmore. Ask her about the letters she burned. Ask her who really needed you to believe you couldn't father children, so that when she became pregnant, you'd never question who the father actually was. Cassian turns slowly, and Elowin's face has gone completely still. That's insane. I told you the letters were from my sister. Were they, my lady? Or were they from Dr. Whitmore, who's been attending you privately for the past 6 months, who has access to your chambers? Who knows exactly which herbs and tinctures can simulate pregnancy symptoms long enough to establish paternity claims? Dr. Whitmore's voice cuts in, sharp and professional. Lord Valemont, you're delirious from pain. These accusations are they accusations, doctor? Or are they facts you hoped would stay buried under the assumption that I was the only conspirator? Cassian looks at Whitmore, then at Elowin, then back at Marcus, and his mind is racing through possibilities that feel like falling downstairs in the dark. Elowin, tell me he's lying. Her silence stretches for exactly 3 seconds, and in those seconds, Cassian watches his entire reality reconstruct itself again. When she finally speaks, her voice is measured, careful. Dr. Whitmore has been treating me for symptoms related to the pregnancy. Nausea, fatigue, dizziness. That's standard medical care, Cassian. There's nothing inappropriate about it. Then why didn't you mention it? Because you were accusing me of infidelity. Because mentioning I had a physician attending me privately would have just given you more ammunition for suspicion. Marcus coughs again, harder this time, and blood flecks his lips. Beautiful performance, my lady. But the truth is simpler. Whitmore is your lover. He's the father of the child. And I helped you both by making sure Cassian believed he was sterile, so that when the pregnancy was announced, he'd focus his suspicion on generic betrayal rather than specific identity. Cassian's hands are shaking now. The control he spent a lifetime building dissolving like sugar in water. Is this true? He directs the question at Whitmore, who stands frozen beside Marcus's bed like a man who just realized the floor is made of glass. Your Grace, I would never... Did you or did you not have private access to the Duchess's chambers? Whitmore's jaw works. I attended her medically, yes, at her request, for legitimate symptoms. And the letters. Cassian's eyes are back on Elowen now, and they're not cold anymore. They're burning. The letters I burned were from Dr. Whitmore. Yes. The admission lands like a stone in still water, ripples spreading outward. They were consultations about symptoms I was experiencing before I realized I was pregnant. Irregular cycles, nausea, fatigue. I didn't tell you because you were distant, because our marriage was functional at best, because I didn't think you'd care about the details of female physiology. That's one version. Marcus's voice is weaker now, but he's committed to the narrative. The other version is that you and Whitmore have been conducting an affair for months, that the pregnancy is his, and that you saw an opportunity to claim it as Cassian's once you manipulated me into confirming the sterility diagnosis. Elowen's composure finally cracks, not into tears, but into fury. You helped me? You manipulated Cassian's entire adult identity to position yourself for inheritance, and now you're trying to frame me as co-conspirator to save yourself? I'm trying to tell the truth before I die. You're not dying, you're performing. Marcus smiles, blood on his teeth. Am I? Dr. Whitmore, what did you give me an hour ago? What tincture did you administer when I complained of headache? Whitmore goes pale. Willow bark extract, standard analgesic. And what else? Nothing else. Liar. Marcus's hand moves to his stomach, and even through the sheet you can see the rigidity of muscle spasm. You gave me something else, something to ensure I wouldn't survive to testify against you. Because if I'm dead, there's no one left to contradict the story you and Elowen have constructed. Cassian's voice cuts through the chaos like a blade. Whitmore. What did you give him? The physician's silence is its own confession. Elowen moves toward Cassian, her hand reaching for his arm, and he pulls away like she's made of poison. Don't. Don't touch me. Don't say anything until I understand what's real. Cassian, I swear to you, your swearing means nothing. Your word means nothing. Everything I've trusted in the past week has turned out to be manipulation or performance or outright lies. He turns to Whitmore. What did you give him? Whitmore's voice is barely audible. Aconite. A small dose. He was threatening to expose certain indiscretions. Indiscretions. Cassian's voice could freeze oceans. What indiscretions? Whitmore looks at Elowen, and the look is confirmation of every nightmare Cassian's been trying not to imagine. The lady and I am... There was a brief period of impropriety, months ago, before the pregnancy. It was ended before anything permanent resulted. But the pregnancy... Elowen's voice is firm, desperate. The pregnancy is yours, Cassian. The timing doesn't match Whitmore's claim. The child was conceived after the affair ended, during the 3 weeks you returned from the Northern Holdings. How convenient. Marcus's voice is fading, the aconite doing its work. How perfectly timed. How exactly the window you needed to make paternity ambiguous enough that Cassian would have to accept it on faith. Cassian backs away from all of them, his spine hitting the wall, his hands pressing flat against stone like he's trying to push through to somewhere reality makes sense. 3 people in this room have lied to me. One poisoned the other to prevent testimony. My wife admits to infidelity but swears the child is mine. The man who's dying confessed to conspiracy but now claims he was protecting me from a larger deception. And the physician who's supposed to heal just admitted to murder. He slides down the wall until he's sitting on the floor, and for the first time in his life, Cassian Valemont looks like exactly what he is. A man who built his entire identity on certainty and just discovered that certainty was the lie all along. Elowen kneels in front of him, her hands on his knees, her eyes searching his face. Cassian, listen to me. Marcus is lying. He's trying to create doubt because doubt is all he has left. The affair with Whitmore happened, yes. I won't lie about that. But it ended months before conception. The child is yours. The medical records prove you're capable. The timeline proves the child is yours. Prove it. I can't prove a negative. You either trust me or you don't. And there it is. The question that's been under everything since the moment she announced the pregnancy. Trust. The thing Cassian doesn't know how to do. The thing he's spent his entire life avoiding by replacing it with control and distance and certainty. Marcus's breathing is shallow now. Each inhale a struggle. Cassian. Cousin. One last truth. Whether the child is yours or not, you'll never know for certain. That's the cost of learning that control is an illusion. You can demand proof, but proof requires trust to interpret. You can isolate variables, but people aren't variables. You built a life on preventing exactly this kind of uncertainty, and now it's all you have. He coughs one last time, blood and finality. Welcome to being human. His eyes close, and Dr. Whitmore checks his pulse with shaking hands. He's unconscious. The aconite is progressing. Without intervention, he'll be dead within the hour. Cassian looks up at Whitmore from the floor. Why should I let you intervene? You just admitted to murder. Attempted murder, Your Grace. He's not dead yet. A distinction without meaning. Whitmore sets his medical bag down, and his hands are steady despite everything. Your Grace, I made a terrible mistake. The affair was wrong. The poisoning was criminal. But I'm telling you truth now because I have nothing left to lose. The child Lady Elowen carries is yours. The timing is accurate. The paternity is certain. Marcus is lying to create chaos because chaos is the only weapon he has left. And I'm supposed to trust the word of a man who just confessed to poisoning someone. You're supposed to use the intelligence you've built this estate on. Count backwards from the announcement. Count the weeks. Compare them to your travel schedule. The mathematics don't lie even if people do. Cassian's head falls back against the wall, his eyes closed, and for a long moment no one speaks. Then he opens his eyes and looks at Whitmore with exhaustion that goes bone deep. Save him. Your Grace. Save Marcus. Treat the aconite. I want him alive to face trial. I want him conscious to answer for everything. And I want you arrested the moment he's stabilized. Whitmore nods once and begins working, pulling compounds from his bag with the mechanical efficiency of training overriding panic. Cassian stands slowly, every movement weighted with cost, and looks at Elowen still kneeling on the floor. I don't know what's true anymore. His voice is raw. I don't know if you're lying or if Marcus is lying or if you're both lying. I don't know if the child is mine. I don't know if trust is even possible after this. All I know is that certainty was the cage I lived in, and now it's gone, and I have no idea how to function without it. Elowen stands as well, and the distance between them is measured in more than feet. Then you learn. You learn how to exist in uncertainty. You learn how to make decisions without guaranteed outcomes. You learn how to be human instead of sovereign. And if I can't, then you stay frozen in this moment forever, unable to move forward or back, and the child grows up with a father who chose certainty over presence. She walks to the door, pauses with her hand on the frame. I told you truth, Cassian. The affair happened. It ended. The child is yours. You can believe me, or you can spend the rest of your life questioning everyone who gets close enough to matter. But understand that the second option isn't protection. It's just another form of dying. She leaves, and Cassian is alone with a physician treating a poisoning victim in the wreckage of every system he thought defined reality. Dr. Whitmore works in silence, administering charcoal and purgatives, forcing Marcus's body to fight the poison even as Marcus remains unconscious and unavailable for the testimony that might have clarified everything or condemned everyone. 2 hours later, Marcus's color begins to return. His breathing stabilizes. He'll live. Cassian stands at the window watching night fall over the estate, each shadow another layer of burial for the man he was this morning. The authorities will return. Whitmore will be arrested for attempted murder. Marcus will face enhanced charges for conspiracy. Elowen will either be telling the truth or executing the most elaborate deception in Valemont history. And Cassian has no way to know which. The child will be born in 5 months. The mathematics say it's his. The timeline supports it. But mathematics and timelines require trust to matter. And trust is the one resource he never learned to cultivate. He hears footsteps behind him. Whitmore, finished with treatment, bag packed. He'll live, Your Grace. I've done what I can. The constables are waiting outside to take me into custody. Cassian doesn't turn. Did you love her? The question hangs in the air, inappropriate and essential. Whitmore's silence stretches long enough that Cassian thinks he won't answer. Then, "No, Your Grace." It was loneliness meeting opportunity. She was isolated in a marriage that resembled imprisonment. I was available and attentive. It wasn't love. It was just proximity, filling emptiness. "And the child is yours? I swear on whatever professional integrity I have left." The affair ended in April. The child was conceived in late June. The mathematics are absolute. Mathematics aren't absolute when people lie about dates. Then have another physician examine her. Have 3 physicians examine her. The pregnancy's progression will confirm conception timing. You don't have to trust my word. Trust the evidence that can't be manipulated. Cassian finally turns, and Whitmore flinches at whatever he sees in the Duke's expression. "Get out. Go to your cell. Face your trial. And pray I never have reason to question this testimony." Whitmore bows and leaves, and Cassian is alone again with the portrait-lined walls and the weight of decisions that can't be unmade. He knows what he has to do, the thing he's avoided his entire life, the thing that terrifies him more than any conspiracy or betrayal. He has to choose to trust without certainty. He has to decide whether Elowen's word is enough, whether the mathematical probability combined with her consistent story is sufficient to build a future on. He has to accept that control was always an illusion, that certainty was always a cage, and that the only way forward is through the exact vulnerability he's spent decades fortifying against. The alternative is to remain frozen here, questioning everything, trusting nothing, raising a child he can never fully accept as his own, while married to a woman he can never fully believe. That's not living. That's just organized dying. He walks through the darkened corridors toward the East Wing, each step a negotiation between who he was and who he might become. The manor feels different in darkness, less like fortress and more like tomb. All these rooms built to house legacy and lineage, turning out to be just expensive ways to be alone. He finds Elowen in her chambers, sitting by the window with her hand on her stomach, staring out at snow that stopped falling but hasn't stopped accumulating. She doesn't turn when he enters. "I don't know how to do this." His voice breaks the silence without ceremony. She looks at him finally, and her expression is exhausted in ways that have nothing to do with pregnancy. "Do what?" "Trust you. Trust anyone. Trust that the ground beneath me is solid when everything I've learned says it's not. Then don't trust me. Trust yourself." "I don't understand." She stands, moving toward him with the careful steps of someone conserving energy. "You've spent your life trusting systems, structures, hierarchies that you thought were immutable, and every single one failed you. Your father's certainty about Blackwell, the medical diagnosis, the loyalty of family, the reliability of evidence and law. All of it collapsed. So stop trusting systems and start trusting your instincts about people." "What do my instincts say about you?" "That I've never given you reason to doubt my word until Marcus told you to. That I stayed loyal during 3 years of isolation. That I fought to prove your capacity for fatherhood when believing you were sterile would have been easier. That I'm still here when I could have left a dozen times." She's close enough now that he can see the exhaustion in her eyes, the cost of fighting to be believed. "Your instincts know the truth, Cassian. You're just terrified to listen because listening means accepting that certainty was the enemy all along. And if I'm wrong, if I choose to trust you, and the child isn't mine, then you're wrong. And you deal with it, and you build something anyway. Because the alternative is to be right and alone, and I promise you that's not the victory you think it is." Cassian's hand reaches out, hesitates, then settles on her stomach where their child or someone's child grows in the exact uncertainty he spent his life avoiding. He feels movement beneath his palm, small, insistent, real. And in that moment, he makes the choice that every person who's ever tried to connect with another human being has to make eventually. He decides that being present and potentially wrong is worth more than being absent and certainly safe. "I believe you." 3 words. That's all. But they carry the weight of everything he's never said before. Elowen's hand covers his, and they stand there in the darkness while snow continues its patient work of covering the estate in layers that make everything look clean until spring reveals what's actually underneath. There's a specific kind of clarity that comes when you've lost everything you thought defined you and discovered you're still breathing. It's not peace. It's not acceptance. It's the cold recognition that all the armor you built was just elaborate ways to avoid finding out who you actually are when the systems collapse. Cassian Valemont is learning this clarity the way men learn to swim when thrown overboard, desperately, violently, with no guarantee of survival. He's chosen trust over certainty, presence over safety, and now he has to live in a world where that choice might destroy him or save him. And there's no way to know which until it's already happened. The night passes without sleep, just two people sitting in darkness watching snow accumulate, while inside Elowen's body a child grows that represents either redemption or the final betrayal. Cassian's hand stays on her stomach, feeling movement that could be his legacy or his humiliation, and he doesn't move it because moving it means retreating back into the fortress, and he's committed now to living outside the walls. Dawn breaks gray and hostile, the kind of morning that feels like the world giving up on warmth entirely. Cassian rises from the chair where exhaustion finally claimed him somewhere around 4, his body stiff, his mind sharp in that dangerous way that comes from too little rest and too much adrenaline. Elowen is asleep on the bed, still dressed, one hand curled protectively over her stomach, even in unconsciousness. He watches her for a long moment, trying to see deception in the curve of her face, in the rhythm of her breathing, but all he sees is a woman carrying weight she didn't ask for and fighting battles on multiple fronts just to survive. He leaves her sleeping and walks through corridors that feel different now, less like his domain and more like a stage where everyone has been performing roles written by someone else. The guest wing is quiet. 2 constables posted outside Marcus's door, their presence a reminder that conspiracy has consequences even when the law can't quite define them. Cassian enters without knocking. Marcus is awake, propped against pillows. His color better than last night, but still carrying the pallor of a man who ingested poison and lived to regret it. His eyes track Cassian's movement with the wariness of prey that knows the predator is close. Come to finish what Whitmore started? His voice is rough, scraped raw by whatever the aconite did to his throat. Cassian pulls a chair close to the bed and sits, his posture relaxed in the way that makes violence more threatening than tension ever could. No. I came to hear the truth. The actual truth, not the performance you gave yesterday designed to create maximum chaos. I told you the truth. Elowen and Whitmore were having an affair. I know. Whitmore confessed before they took him. What I need to know is whether your claim about the child's paternity was truth or strategy. Marcus's laugh is bitter. Does it matter? You'll never know for certain. That's the beauty of uncertainty, cousin. It corrodes from the inside. It matters because if you lied about that specifically to create doubt, then you're not just a conspirator. You're something worse. Worse than what? Worse than the man who locked his pregnant wife away because he couldn't handle his own inadequacy? Worse than the system that values bloodline over humanity? Tell me, Cassian, what exactly is worse than the empire you've built on control and fear? Cassian's hands don't move from his lap, but his eyes go very cold. Answer the question. Marcus studies him for a long moment, and something shifts in his expression, fatigue maybe, or the recognition that the game is already over regardless of what he says now. The child is yours. The admission lands quiet as snow. The affair was real. Whitmore and Elowen, months ago, brief and stupid and driven by loneliness I helped create by isolating you from her. But the timing doesn't support his paternity. I checked. I had the dates. The conception window falls squarely when you were here, when you actually spent time with her instead of touring properties and avoiding intimacy. Then why did I suggest otherwise? Because I wanted you to doubt everything. Because if you can't trust the paternity, you can't trust the heir. And if you can't trust the heir, maybe you'd still consider me a succession backup. It was desperation, Cassian, the kind that comes when you've spent 10 years building toward something and watch it collapse in an afternoon. Cassian leans back, processing, his jaw working. You manipulated my entire adult life, paid a physician to lie about my fertility, positioned yourself as heir apparent, and when that unraveled, you tried to destroy my marriage by creating doubt about my own child. Marcus doesn't deny it. He just looks at Cassian with something that might be regret if it had less bitterness mixed in. I did. And you know what the worst part is? You made it easy. You were so convinced you were broken that you never questioned it. You were so committed to control that you never built anything real. I didn't have to work hard to isolate you, Cassian. You did that yourself. I just made sure you stayed that way. The words are designed to wound, and they do. But Cassian doesn't react beyond a slight tightening around his eyes. The authorities will charge you with conspiracy to defraud, attempted manipulation of succession. The estate trustees will vote to remove you from the line of inheritance entirely. I know. You'll lose everything. I already have. Marcus shifts against the pillows, wincing from pain that's probably still radiating from the aconite damage. But so have you, cousin. You've lost the certainty that made you functional. You've lost the distance that kept you safe. You've chosen to trust your wife based on mathematics and instinct. And that might be brave, or it might be the biggest mistake of your life. Either way, you're in the same darkness I am now. Welcome to being human. Cassian stands, and the movement is final. The difference is, I'm choosing to live in the darkness instead of manufacturing light that isn't real. You built your entire strategy on making me believe a lie. I'm building forward on accepting I might never have complete truth. That's not the same darkness, Marcus. That's just different kinds of fear. He walks to the door, pauses with his hand on the latch. They'll move you to the county jail this afternoon. Trial will be in 3 weeks. I won't attend. I won't testify. I'm done letting you occupy space in my life. Marcus's voice follows him out. You think this ends here? You think exposure and trial and removal from succession is the conclusion? Cassian, this is just intermission. The real damage is already done. You'll spend the rest of your life wondering if the child is actually yours. You'll look at your wife and see doubt. You'll build your legacy on foundations you can't verify. That's the inheritance I'm leaving you. Permanent uncertainty. Cassian doesn't respond. He just leaves, closing the door on a man who's already disappeared into the consequences of his own strategy. The corridor outside is empty except for the constables, and Cassian walks past them toward the main house feeling lighter and heavier simultaneously. Lighter because Marcus is contained, finished, removed from the board. Heavier because the truth about permanent uncertainty isn't wrong. He'll never know with absolute certainty that the child is his. He can trust the mathematics, trust Whitmore's confession, trust Elowin's word, but trust isn't the same as knowing, and he's going to have to live in that gap. He finds Elowin in his breakfast room, dressed in dark blue that makes her look like deep water, her hair pinned back with the efficiency of a woman who stopped caring about beauty and started focusing on function. She's drinking tea but not eating, her hand wrapped around the cup like she's trying to absorb warmth through porcelain. She looks up when he enters, and the question in her eyes is loud without words. Cassian sits across from her, and for a moment neither speaks. Then he says the thing he came here to say. Marcus confirmed the child is mine. The timing, the conception window, the mathematics all support it. Whitmore's testimony aligns. You've been telling the truth. Elowin sets her cup down slowly. I know I have. The question is whether you believe it. I do. 2 words, but they carry everything. She studies his face like she's looking for cracks in the foundation, places where certainty might be hiding under the surface of trust. What changed? I did. Or I'm trying to. I don't know if I'm any good at this, at functioning without control, at accepting uncertainty as just the cost of being close to someone. But I know the alternative is dying alone in a fortress I built to protect me from exactly this kind of vulnerability. He reaches across the table, and his hand is steady despite everything. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing trust. I'm choosing to build forward, even if the foundation isn't guaranteed. And if that makes me weak or foolish or vulnerable to betrayal, then that's just what it costs to actually live instead of just existing inside systems. Elowin's fingers lace with his, and her grip is strong. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And human is what I've been waiting for you to be for 3 years. They sit like that, hands joined across a table in a breakfast room while outside the window snow begins to melt under rare winter sun, revealing the ground underneath, showing what's actually there instead of what white covering made people assume. The moment breaks when Mr. Harwick enters, looking harassed and carrying documents that suggest legal complications. Your Grace, my lady, I apologize for the interruption, but there's been a development. Cassian doesn't release Elowin's hand. What development? The estate trustees have called an emergency session. They've heard about the charges against Lord Valemont and the questions regarding succession. They're demanding a formal review of the heir situation before the child is born. That's not their authority. They're claiming it falls under fiduciary responsibility to the estate. If there's any question about legitimate succession, they want it resolved now rather than after birth when changing documentation becomes complicated. Elowen's jaw tightens. They want to question my fidelity in a formal review. They want to put the pregnancy on trial. Harwick looks uncomfortable. In essence, yes. They're requesting medical examination by independent physicians to establish conception timing and paternity probability. They're also requesting testimony from household staff about your activities during the relevant time period. Cassian's voice drops to dangerous quiet. Who called for this review? Harwick hesitates. Lord Pemberton, Your Grace, the senior trustee. He claims he's protecting the estate from potential fraud. Pemberton. Cassian releases Elowen's hand and stands, and the movement has violence coiled inside it. Pemberton, who advised my father. Pemberton, who was mentor to Marcus during his early career. Pemberton, who has the most to gain if succession falls into extended legal dispute that he can influence from his position as senior trustee. Your Grace, I can't speak to motivation, but the review is within their legal authority if they can demonstrate reasonable cause for concern. Reasonable cause. My wife is pregnant. The medical evidence supports my capacity for fatherhood. Marcus confessed to conspiracy. What additional cause do they need? They're arguing that the confession was coerced and that multiple conflicting testimonies create sufficient doubt to warrant independent verification. It's Marcus. It's him still playing the board even from a jail cell. He knew this would happen. He probably arranged it before he was arrested. Elowen stands as well, her hand moving to her stomach. When is the review? Tomorrow morning. The trustees are gathering at Pemberton Hall. They're requesting your attendance, both of you, along with any witnesses you wish to present. Cassian looks at Elowen, and what passes between them is the recognition that the fight isn't over, that exposure and confession and choosing trust was just the opening round of a longer war. We'll be there. Harwick nods and withdraws, leaving them alone in a breakfast room that suddenly feels too small for the fury building inside it. Cassian moves to the window, his hands bracing against the frame, his shoulders rigid. They're going to put you through examination like you're a criminal. They're going to question servants about your movements, your correspondence, your privacy. They're going to make you prove fidelity in a public forum designed to humiliate. His voice is shaking, not with fear but with rage so compressed it's barely contained. Elowen joins him at the window, standing close but not touching. Then let them. Let them examine. Let them question. Let them try to find evidence of infidelity that doesn't exist. I'm not afraid of the truth, Cassian. I'm only afraid of you believing their doubt over my word. I don't. Then we go tomorrow. We face the trustees. We provide whatever evidence they demand. And we make sure Pemberton understands that manipulating the review will have consequences. What consequences? He's protected by trustee authority. He's been managing estate business since before I was born. He has more political connections than I can count. Then we don't fight him politically. We fight him with truth, with documentation, with testimony that can't be dismissed. Cassian turns from the window, and his expression is something between determination and desperation. I need to know everything, every moment of the affair, every letter, every interaction with Whitmore. If they're going to question you, I need to know what they might find so there are no surprises. Elowen doesn't flinch from the request. All right, sit down. I'll tell you everything. They return to the table, and for the next 2 hours, Elowen describes in clinical detail the progression of loneliness that led to the affair, the specific dates of contact with Whitmore, the reasons it ended, the letters she burned because they were evidence of weakness she didn't want preserved. Cassian listens without interrupting, his face carved from stone, absorbing every detail like he's memorizing a map of territory he'll have to navigate tomorrow. When she finishes, the silence is heavy. Then Cassian speaks, and his voice is steady. Thank you for the honesty. I know that cost you. Everything costs me, Cassian. That's what you don't understand about being anything other than the one with all the power. Every conversation is cost assessment. Every truth is vulnerability. Every moment of honesty is a gamble that you won't use it as a weapon later. I won't. You say that now. But tomorrow, when they're questioning me, when they're trying to find inconsistency in my story, you'll be sitting there deciding whether to defend me or protect yourself. That's the reality of trust. It only works if it's mutual. It is mutual. Prove it. The challenge hangs between them, and Cassian knows exactly what she's asking. She's asking him to walk into that review room tomorrow and defend her publicly, to stake his authority and his reputation on her word, to choose her over the trustees who've been the foundation of estate management since before he inherited. She's asking him to burn bridges he can't rebuild if he's wrong. He meets her eyes, and the decision is already made. Tomorrow, I'll stand beside you and tell the trustees that I trust my wife's word over their doubt. I'll provide the medical evidence, I'll testify to the conception timeline, and if Pemberton tries to manipulate the proceedings, I'll remove him from the trustee board, regardless of political consequences. Elowyn's breath catches. That could destabilize the entire estate management structure. I don't care. The estate managed to exist before Pemberton, and it'll exist after him. What it can't exist with is me choosing political convenience over the woman carrying my child. Our child. The correction is quiet, but it shifts something fundamental. Our child. Yes, they spend the rest of the day preparing, gathering medical records, interviewing household staff to secure testimony about the timeline, documenting everything that can be documented. Cassian sends word to 3 independent physicians requesting they attend the review to provide expert testimony on conception timing based on pregnancy progression. He drafts a formal statement outlining the conspiracy Marcus orchestrated and the financial evidence supporting it. He builds a case the way he'd build a military campaign, every angle covered, every weakness shored up. But underneath the preparation, he knows the real question tomorrow won't be about evidence. It'll be about whether he can stand in front of men who've known him since birth and choose trust over certainty, relationship over institution, love over legacy. That night, they don't sleep in separate wings. Elowyn stays in the master chamber, and they lie beside each other in darkness that feels less like isolation and more like shared vigilance. Cassian's hand rests on her stomach, feeling the movement of life that's either his redemption or his destruction, and he doesn't remove it. Just before dawn, Elowyn speaks into the darkness. Whatever happens tomorrow, know this. I've told you the truth. The child is yours, and I'm staying, not because I'm trapped, but because I'm choosing to believe you're capable of becoming the man you're pretending to be right now. Cassian's response is equally quiet. I'm not pretending. I'm terrified. There's a difference. Good. Fear means you understand what you're risking. Certainty never taught you that. They rise with first light and dress like they're going to war, because they are. Elowyn in deep green that makes her look like a forest before a storm. Cassian in black that makes him look like the storm itself. They don't speak during the carriage ride to Pemberton Hall, just sit across from each other, watching winter landscape pass, each lost in their own calculation of what today might cost. Pemberton Hall is smaller than Westmore Manor, but older. All dark stone and narrow windows that suggest the building was designed for defense rather than comfort. The trustees are gathered in the Great Hall, 7 men ranging from late 40s to early 70s, all dressed in formal attire, all carrying the weight of inherited authority. Lord Pemberton presides at the head of a long table, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, looking like Justice if Justice had a political agenda. Cassian and Elowyn enter together, and the room falls silent. Pemberton stands, gesturing to chairs positioned at the opposite end of the table from the trustees. The geography already a verdict. Your Grace, Lady Valemont, thank you for attending. This review has been called to address concerns regarding succession and the legitimacy of the heir apparent. Please be seated. Cassian doesn't move toward the chairs. Before we begin, I want to understand the authority under which this review is being conducted. The trustees oversee estate financial management, not family affairs. Pemberton's smile is thin. We oversee the preservation of the estate, Your Grace, which includes ensuring legitimate succession. When questions arise that could impact inheritance, we have not only authority but obligation to seek clarity. Questions raised by a man currently in jail for conspiracy to defraud that very succession, questions that remain regardless of Lord Valemont's current legal status. Multiple testimonies suggest irregularities. We're simply seeking truth. Cassian's voice could freeze blood. Then let's seek it. My wife is prepared to undergo medical examination by independent physicians. I've brought documentation of conception timeline cross-referenced with my travel schedule. I've secured testimony from household staff. What additional truth do you require? Pemberton gestures to a clerk who begins distributing documents to the trustees. We've conducted our own investigation, Your Grace. We've interviewed staff members who report that doctor. Whitmore had unusual access to Lady Valemont's chambers during the period in question. We've discovered correspondence between them that suggests intimate communication. We've established that your own absence from the estate created opportunity for infidelity. He pauses, and the silence is calculated. We're not questioning Lady Valemont's character lightly. We're following evidence to its logical conclusion. Elwyn's voice cuts through before Cassian can respond, then follow it accurately. Yes, Dr. Whitmore attended me. Yes, there was correspondence. Yes, there was a brief affair that ended months before conception. All of this has been disclosed. What you're not following is the medical evidence that establishes conception timing, the sworn testimony from Dr. Whitmore himself confirming he's not the father, and the documentation proving my husband was present during the conception window. Pemberton's expression doesn't change. Dr. Whitmore's testimony is compromised by his criminal charges. A man facing imprisonment for attempted murder might say anything to curry favor. Then examine the pregnancy progression. Bring in your independent physicians. The physical evidence doesn't lie. One of the other trustees, Lord Ashford, speaks up, his voice carrying the weight of someone who's been quiet until certainty arrived. We have, my lady. We've had 3 physicians review the available information. 2 confirm that conception timing aligns with the Duke's presence. 1 suggests the window is ambiguous enough to include the period when Dr. Whitmore had access. 2-1 in favor of my paternity. Cassian's voice is steel. And yet you're proceeding with this review based on the minority opinion. Ashford shifts uncomfortably. We're proceeding because the stakes demand absolute certainty, Your Grace. There is no absolute certainty. There's only probability and trust. And I'm telling you as Duke of Westmore that I trust my wife and accept the child as my legitimate heir. Pemberton leans forward, and his expression shifts to something almost sympathetic, which makes it more dangerous. Your Grace, we understand this is personal for you. But the estate isn't personal. It's an institution that will outlive all of us. We can't allow succession to be determined by emotion or hope. We need verifiable truth. And if verifiable truth doesn't exist, if the best we have is medical probability and sworn testimony, then we must consider alternative arrangements for succession until paternity can be definitively established. Cassian's hands flatten on the table, and the sound echoes through the hall. You want to bypass my child based on ambiguity manufactured by a conspiracy you're choosing to ignore. You want to maintain succession uncertainty so that you can influence the outcome. This isn't about protecting the estate, Pemberton. This is about preserving your control. Pemberton's eyes narrow. Careful, Your Grace. Accusations of impropriety go both directions. Do they? Then let me be clear about mine. You were Marcus's mentor. You've been positioning him for influence since he came of age. You benefit from succession dispute because it extends your authority as senior trustee. This review isn't about truth. It's about making sure the estate remains destabilized long enough for you to engineer the outcome you want. The room erupts into protest, trustees talking over each other, Pemberton calling for order, but Cassian doesn't stop. I'm dissolving this review. I'm removing you from the trustee board effective immediately, and I'm establishing paternity by ducal decree based on medical evidence and sworn testimony. The child Lady Valemont carries is my legitimate heir, and anyone who questions that will be removed from estate authority. Pemberton stands, his face flushed with rage that's been years in the building. You can't dissolve this board. You can't remove trustees without majority vote. And you certainly can't establish paternity by decree when the evidence is disputed. Watch me. Cassian pulls a document from his coat, unfolds it, and places it on the table. This is an emergency writ transferring trustee authority to a new board composed of independent estate managers with no family connections. It's signed by 3 county magistrates and takes effect immediately. Your term ends now. Pemberton stares at the document like it's written in a language he doesn't speak. This is illegal. This violates every protocol of estate management. This is me protecting my family from men who've decided political power is more important than truth. You want to challenge it, take it to court. But while you're filing briefs and scheduling hearings, my child will be born and recognized as legitimate heir, and your influence will be memory. The silence that follows is the sound of a power structure collapsing, and every man in the room knows it. Pemberton's voice, when it comes, is quiet with fury. You're making an enemy of every tradition this estate was built on. I'm making a choice between tradition and humanity, and I'm choosing humanity. Cassian takes Elwyn's hand and pulls her to her feet. We're leaving. The review is over. The succession is established. And anyone who wants to dispute it can do so through proper legal channels while we're busy actually living our lives. They walk toward the door and none of the trustees move to stop them. too shocked by the demolition of authority that just happened in the space of a conversation. But as Cassian reaches the threshold, Pemberton's voice follows them one last time. "You think this ends here, Your Grace? You think removing me from the board ends the question? The estate will never accept an heir born under doubt. Your legacy will be questioned for generations. The child will grow up knowing their legitimacy was established by decree rather than proof. That's the inheritance you're giving them. Permanent shadow." Cassian turns back, and his expression is something beyond anger, beyond fear, landing somewhere close to freedom. Then that's the inheritance they get, because the alternative is growing up watching their father choose certainty over their mother, institution over family, legacy over love. And I won't do that. Not anymore. He looks at the assembled trustees, at these men who've spent lifetimes managing systems and forgetting the people inside them. The estate will survive doubt. It's survived worse. What it won't survive is another generation of men who think control is the same as strength and isolation is the same as protection. So yes, Pemberton, this ends here. Not because the questions are answered, but because I'm done letting questions prevent me from living. They leave Pemberton Hall while behind them, 7 men sit in the wreckage of authority that just discovered its limits. The carriage ride back is silent until they're halfway home, and then Elowen starts laughing. And it's not humor. It's relief mixed with hysteria, mixed with the kind of joy that comes when you've survived something that should have destroyed you. Cassian looks at her like she might be breaking. "What's funny? You just burned down the entire estate management structure. You removed the senior trustee. You established paternity by decree. You chose me over every system you were raised to protect." Her laughter subsides into something more serious. "You actually did it. You chose trust over certainty. Relationship over institution. You became human." Cassian's hand finds hers again. "I'm terrified I made the wrong choice." "Good. That means you understand what you risked. But Cassian? What? You didn't make the wrong choice. You made the only choice that leads anywhere other than dying alone in a fortress you built to protect yourself from exactly this kind of vulnerability." The carriage continues through snow that's melting fast, revealing ground that's been there all along, just covered by winter that made everything look different than it actually was. They arrive at Westmore Manor as afternoon light slants through windows that look less like barriers and more like openings, and Cassian helps Elowen down from the carriage with his hand steady on her arm. But as they reach the entrance, a rider approaches at speed, his horse lathered, his expression urgent. The rider dismounts and bows quickly. "Your Grace, message from the county jail. It's Lord Valemont. He's demanding to speak with you. Says it's urgent. Says there's something you need to know before..." "Before what?" The rider hesitates. He wouldn't say Your Grace, but he claims it changes everything. Cassian and Elowen exchange a glance, and in that look is the recognition that the war isn't over, that Marcus has one more move to make, and whatever it is has been waiting for exactly this moment. Here's the thing about survival nobody tells you. It's not the dramatic moments that define whether you make it. It's what you do in the silence after the storm. When the adrenaline fades and you're left standing in wreckage, you partly caused, partly inherited, and have to decide whether to rebuild or just walk away from the whole burning structure. Cassian Valemont is standing in that silence now, listening to a messenger tell him that Marcus has one more revelation, one more card to play, one more truth that supposedly changes everything. And the exhaustion that floods through him isn't fear. It's the bone-deep weariness of a man who's learning that certainty was never the destination, just another kind of prison he mistook for safety. The ride to the county jail is shorter than Cassian wants it to be. Not enough time to prepare for whatever Marcus has been saving for exactly this moment. Elowen sits beside him in the carriage, her hand resting on her stomach in that unconscious protective gesture that's become constant, her expression unreadable. She hasn't said anything since the messenger delivered his cryptic warning, just nodded once when Cassian asked if she wanted to come with him, and settled into the carriage with the resolve of someone who's done negotiating with uncertainty. The jail is a stone building that looks like it was designed to break spirits through architecture alone, all narrow windows and iron reinforcement, the kind of place that makes you grateful for freedom just by proximity. The warden meets them at the entrance, a tired man with the expression of someone who's seen too many aristocrats destroy themselves and learned to stop being surprised. Lord Valemont has been difficult, Your Grace, demanding special treatment, threatening legal action, making claims about his innocence. But this morning he changed, became quiet, requested to see you specifically. Wouldn't say why. Cassian nods, and the warden leads them through corridors that smell like damp stone and unwashed humanity, down to a visiting room that's barely large enough for a table and 3 chairs. Marcus is already there, seated with his hands folded on the scarred wood surface, looking thinner than he did 3 days ago. His aristocratic polish scraped away by confinement to reveal something raw underneath. He looks up when they enter, and his eyes move between Cassian and Elowin with an expression that might be resignation or might be relief. Hard to distinguish. You came together? Good. You should both hear this. Cassian remained standing, Elowin beside him, neither willing to sit and grant the intimacy of leveled eye contact. The warden said you have information that changes everything. I'm skeptical that anything you say at this point has that kind of weight, but I'm here. So talk. Marcus's laugh is quiet, empty of humor. Always so direct. That's what I envied about you, cousin. You never had to perform. Authority just lived in you like breathing. The rest of us spent our lives trying to fake it. He shifts in the chair, and the chains on his wrists clink against the table edge. I lied about something significant. And before they transfer me to the fortress prison tomorrow, I need you to know the truth. Not because it benefits me, because you deserve it. Cassian's jaw tightens. More manipulation. More strategy designed to create doubt at exactly the moment when I've committed to trust. No. This is the opposite. This is me telling you that your trust was justified, even though it terrifies you to rely on it. Marcus looks directly at Elowin, and something in his expression softens in a way that makes him look younger. Less like a conspirator and more like someone who made choices he regrets. I lied in the guest wing when I suggested the child might not be Cassian's. I lied when I implied you and Whitmore's affair extended into the conception window. The truth is I had access to all the household records. I knew exactly when the affair ended. I knew exactly when the child was conceived. And the mathematics are absolute. The child is Cassian's. The silence that follows is heavier than any accusation. Elowin's voice is steel wrapped in exhaustion. Then why say otherwise? Why create doubt when you knew it was false? Because I wanted Cassian to question everything. I wanted him to feel what I felt for 10 years, that constant erosion of certainty, that inability to trust anything, including his own judgment. It was petty. It was cruel. And it was the last move I had left. Cassian moves to the table, his hands pressing flat against the surface, leaning down until he's eye level with Marcus. You tried to destroy my marriage with a lie you knew was false. You tried to make me doubt my own child. You tried to ensure I'd spend the rest of my life in the same uncertainty you manufactured for yourself. Yes. And now you're confessing because why? Conscience? Redemption? One last attempt to seem human before they lock you away. Marcus meets his eyes. And the facade is completely gone now. Just 2 men who grew up in the same world looking at each other across the wreckage of what that world does to people who try to survive inside it. I'm confessing because I'm tired, Cassian. I'm tired of the strategy and the performance and the constant calculation. I spent 10 years building toward inheritance, and in the end, all I built was a cage made of my own ambition. You at least had moments of something real with Elowin, even if you were too controlled to recognize them. I had nothing, just the fantasy that power would fill whatever emptiness drives men like us. He leans back, the chains rattling. The child is yours. Elowin never betrayed you beyond that brief affair with Whitmore. Every doubt I planted was manufactured. Every whisper was designed to isolate you further. And it almost worked, except you did something I never thought you were capable of. You chose trust over certainty. You chose her over the system. You became something other than what we were raised to be. Cassian straightens slowly, processing, his mind working through implications that keep shifting shape. Why should I believe this confession any more than the last one? Because this one cost me the only thing I had left, my belief that you were as broken as I am. If I admit the child is yours, if I confirm that you're capable of the intimacy and trust I never managed, then I have to face the fact that I destroyed my life chasing something you already had and were just too afraid to claim. Marcus's voice cracks on the last word, the first real emotion Cassian has heard from him that isn't performed for effect. You won, cousin, not because you outmaneuvered me, because you were willing to risk being human, and I wasn't. Elowen's hand finds Cassian's, her fingers interlacing with his, and the gesture is both anchor and permission. Cassian looks at Marcus for a long moment, and what he sees isn't the enemy anymore. It's just a man who made different choices and is now living with consequences that look a lot like dying alone. Thank you for the truth. Even if it comes too late to change anything, at least it confirms what I chose to believe. Marcus nods once, and exhaustion settles over his features like a shroud. For what it's worth, she's stronger than you know. She survived 3 years of your isolation and came out sharp enough to dismantle my entire strategy. Don't waste that by falling back into control once the immediate threat is over. I won't. Marcus's smile is sad. You will. It's who you are. But maybe she'll keep calling you on it until you actually change. The warden appears at the door, indicating time is up, and Cassian turns to leave with Elowen still holding his hand. At the threshold, he pauses and looks back. Marcus, for whatever this is worth, I don't forgive you, but I understand how you got here, and I hope whatever comes next is less destructive than what came before. Marcus doesn't respond, just watches them leave with eyes that have already started seeing past the present into whatever future looks like from inside a prison cell. The ride back to Westmore Manor is quiet for the first half, both of them processing what just happened, the final confirmation that all the doubt was manufactured, all the uncertainty was strategic, all the pain was avoidable if either of them had chosen differently earlier. Then Elowen speaks, her voice soft but carrying weight. He was right about one thing. You're going to fall back into control. It's reflexive for you. The moment things stabilize, you'll start building walls again because walls feel safer than openness. Cassian doesn't deny it. Probably. It's what I know. It's how I survived childhood in a house that valued discipline over affection and legacy over humanity. Then I need you to understand something. I'm not staying to watch you rebuild the fortress. I'm staying because I believe you're capable of building something different. But if you prove me wrong, if you choose isolation over intimacy once the immediate crisis is over, I won't fight you for years waiting for change. I'll just leave. It's not a threat. It's a boundary, clear and firm, the kind that comes from someone who's learned that survival sometimes means walking away from situations that will destroy you slowly. Cassian's hand tightens on hers. I don't want you to leave. Then don't give me reasons to. Don't retreat into being Duke of Westmore at the expense of being my husband. Don't let the estate become more important than the people living in it. Don't choose legacy over the life we could actually build together. Her voice gentles slightly. I know you're terrified of vulnerability. I know trusting me feels like standing on ground that might collapse. But Cassian, that's just what intimacy is. It's choosing someone despite the risk. It's building on foundations you can't guarantee. And if you can't do that, then we're just two people coexisting in the same space pretending a marriage exists, when really it's just a strategic alliance with occasional affection. Cassian looks at her, and the afternoon light coming through the carriage window makes her look like something painted, unreal in her clarity. I don't know if I'm capable of what you're asking. You are. You've already proven it. You removed Pemberton from the trustee board. You chose my word over institutional authority. You established our child's legitimacy by decree. You did all of that despite being terrified you were wrong. That's capability. That was crisis. Crisis forces action. I'm asking what happens when things are stable and the old patterns start feeling comfortable again. Then we set up systems that prevent backsliding. We establish regular time together that isn't about estate business. We make decisions jointly instead of you deciding and informing me later. We build accountability into the structure of how we live. She shifts closer, and her free hand moves to his face, turning him to meet her eyes directly. You're not alone in this anymore, Cassian. You don't have to carry everything yourself, but you have to actually let me help instead of just performing partnership while maintaining control. How do I do that? You start by telling me what terrifies you, not about the estate or the succession or Marcus. About us. About what you're actually afraid of when you think about being vulnerable with me. Cassian's throat works, and for a moment he looks like he might retreat behind formality, but then something shifts and the honesty comes out rough and unpolished. I'm afraid you'll see who I actually am underneath the authority and decide it's not worth staying for. I'm afraid the child will be born and you'll realize you settled for me because the alternative was isolation, not because you actually wanted this. I'm afraid that everything I've built my identity on was just compensation for being fundamentally unlovable, And once you have the child, you'll realize you don't need me anymore. The confession lands between them like something fragile and essential. And Elowen doesn't rush to reassure or dismiss, just holds the weight of it with him. Then her voice comes, steady and certain. I stayed through 3 years of you keeping me at arm's length. I fought to prove your fertility when accepting sterility would have been easier. I walked into Pemberton Hall knowing they'd try to destroy my reputation. And I did it because the alternative was giving up on something I believe can be real. If I was going to leave Cassian, I would have done it already. The fact that I'm still here, still fighting, still choosing you despite everything, is the only proof I can offer that this isn't about settling or needing. It's about wanting. And I want you, even the parts you think are unlovable. Cassian's eyes are wet, and he doesn't try to hide it. I don't know how to be what you deserve. Then be what you are and let me decide if it's enough. Stop trying to earn worthiness and just exist. Stop performing competence and just be human. Stop protecting me from your uncertainty and just share it so we can navigate it together. The carriage slows as they approach the manor, and through the window, Cassian can see the estate sprawling in late afternoon light. All that architecture he inherited and maintained and treated like sacred obligation. It looks different now, less like fortress and more like just a building. Impressive, but not infinite. Powerful, but not permanent. They enter through the main doors, and servants bustle around them with the practiced efficiency of people who know how to be present without being intrusive. Cassian gives instructions about dinner, about correspondence that needs handling, about estate matters that continue regardless of personal crisis, and Elowen watches him slip into Duke mode with the ease of lifetime practice. Then she speaks, quiet but firm. Cassian. He stops mid-instruction to a footman, turns to her. Tomorrow, those things can wait. Tonight you're having dinner with your wife in your chambers. No servants, no business, just two people who've survived something talking about what comes next. It's not a request. The footman waits, uncertain, and Cassian realizes this is the first test of what he just claimed to be committed to. He can default to estate business and prove Elowen's concern justified, or he can choose differently right now in this small moment that probably matters more than he wants to admit. He looks at the footman. Have dinner sent to the master chambers at 7. 2 settings. No interruptions unless the manor is actively burning down. The footman bows and withdraws, and Elowen's expression carries something that looks like cautious approval. That was harder for you than it should have been. Cassian doesn't deny it. Everything about this is harder than it should be. But I'm trying. I know. I can see it. Just keep trying even when the crisis is over and defaulting to control feels easier than staying present. They walk together through corridors that feel less oppressive than they did a week ago, less like stone declaration of permanence and more like just the space they happen to inhabit. The master chambers are warm, fire already lit by staff who anticipated their return, and Cassian finds himself seeing the room differently than he has in years. Not as his domain, as their space. The bed they'll share, the chairs where they'll sit, the window that looks out on grounds that will witness their child growing up. He moves to that window, looking out at the gardens buried under snow that's melting fast, revealing the structure underneath that winter only temporarily obscured. Elowen joins him, standing close enough that their shoulders touch. What are you thinking about? Cassian's voice is quiet. About how much time I wasted being afraid. About how Marcus spent 10 years destroying himself, chasing something I already had access to, but was too controlled to claim. About how the estate will continue existing whether I'm happy or miserable, so I might as well choose the version of life that actually includes living. That's progress. It's exhaustion pretending to be wisdom. I'm too tired to maintain the walls anymore. Sometimes exhaustion is just clarity without the energy to lie about it. She turns from the window, moving to one of the chairs by the fire, and gestures for him to join her. He does, sitting across from her close enough to touch, but allowing space for conversation that needs room. Tell me about your father. The request comes unexpected, and Cassian's instinct is to deflect, but he's committed now to trying something different than his reflexive patterns. He was precise. Everything had its place, its purpose, its proper execution. He ran the estate like a military campaign, and he raised me the same way. Affection was weakness. Emotion was lack of discipline. Control was the only acceptable response to chaos. Did you love him? Cassian has to think about that longer than he wants to. I respected him. I feared disappointing him. I modeled my entire approach to life on his example. But love? I don't know if I knew him well enough to love him. He wasn't a person to me. He was an institution I inherited along with the title. And you became what he taught you to become. Until it stopped working. Until you announced the pregnancy and everything he taught me turned out to be inadequate for actually navigating human complexity. Elowen leans forward, her elbows on her knees, her expression intent. You're not your father, Cassian. You're capable of change he never attempted. You're capable of choosing differently. But you have to actively choose it, every day, in small decisions that feel insignificant until you realize they're building the foundation of something completely different than what you inherited. What does that look like practically? It looks like asking me how I feel instead of assuming. It looks like admitting when you don't know something instead of pretending certainty. It looks like letting the child see you be human instead of just authoritative. It looks like building a marriage that's actually a partnership instead of a hierarchy with occasional intimacy. Cassian absorbs that, and the silence stretches comfortable rather than tense. I want that. I want to build something different. I just don't have a model for it. Then we create one. We make mistakes. We correct course. We figure it out together instead of you trying to engineer the perfect solution before we begin. A knock at the door interrupts, and servants enter with dinner, setting up the table with practiced efficiency and then withdrawing with bows that feel less like deference and more like simple courtesy. They eat together and the conversation shifts to lighter things, to plans for the nursery, to names they might consider for the child, to stories about Elowen's childhood that Cassian has never heard because he never asked. The food is good, the fire is warm, and for the first time in memory, Cassian feels something other than the constant low-level anxiety that's been his baseline for as long as he can remember. After dinner, they sit together on the couch, Elowen leaning against him with his arm around her shoulders, her hand on her stomach where their child continues the patient work of growing into someone who'll inherit all of this complexity. Cassian's hand joins hers there, and the movement under their palms is stronger now, more insistent, life announcing itself without apology. What do you think they'll be like? Elowen's voice is soft, almost dreaming. Strong, I hope. But strong in ways we weren't. Strong enough to be vulnerable. Strong enough to choose connection over control. Strong enough to build something better than what we inherited. That's a lot of pressure to put on someone who isn't born yet. It's not pressure. It's possibility. We get to raise them differently than we were raised. We get to show them that strength includes gentleness and authority, includes accountability and legacy as something you build through relationships, not just through maintaining systems. Cassian's throat tightens. I want to be a good father. I don't know how. My model was discipline and distance, but I want to do better. Then you will. You'll make mistakes, but you'll correct them. You'll fall into old patterns, but you'll recognize them and choose differently. You'll be human with them instead of institutional. And that will be enough. How do you know? Because you're already doing it with me, imperfectly, with backsliding. But you're trying, and trying is the foundation of actually changing. They sit in silence for a while, just breathing together, feeling the child move, existing in a moment that's not crisis or resolution, just the space between where life actually happens when you're not performing or defending or calculating next moves. Eventually, Elowen speaks again, her voice carrying a weight that signals importance. I need to tell you something about the affair, something I haven't said yet. Cassian tenses slightly, but doesn't pull away. All right, it wasn't about Whitmore. It wasn't even really about loneliness, though that's what I told myself. It was about trying to feel something other than invisible. You were physically present, but emotionally unavailable. And I started wondering if I was even real to you or just another estate asset you maintained. She pauses, gathering words. The affair was me trying to prove to myself that I could still register as human to someone. It was stupid and destructive and solved nothing, but I need you to understand it wasn't betrayal of you specifically. It was me betraying myself by looking for validation in the wrong places because I couldn't figure out how to ask for it from you directly. Cassian processes that, and the hurt is real, but so is the understanding underneath it. I made you feel invisible. Yes, I'm sorry. I know. And I forgive you. But I need you to understand that forgiveness doesn't mean it didn't cost me something. It doesn't mean I'm obligated to forget or to never mention how your control affected me. It means I'm choosing to build forward despite the damage. But the damage existed and pretending otherwise helps no one. You're right. I hurt you by choosing distance over presence. I made you question your worth because I was too afraid to show you mine. And that's on me, not on your response to it. Elowen shifts to look at him directly, her eyes searching his face for something. You mean that? Yes. Then we can actually move forward, not by pretending the past didn't happen, but by acknowledging it and choosing to build something different. She settles back against him, and the weight of her trust is heavier than any responsibility the estate ever demanded. They stay like that until the fire burns low and exhaustion starts pulling at the edges of consciousness. And then they move to bed together, not for performance or duty, but just for the simple comfort of shared space and shared warmth. Cassian lies awake long after Elowen's breathing evens into sleep, staring at shadows on the ceiling cast by dying firelight, thinking about legacy and what it actually means. His father built an empire of control and died alone despite being surrounded by servants and family. Marcus destroyed himself chasing power and ended up in a cell with nothing but regret for company. Pemberton spent decades accumulating authority and lost it in a single conversation when someone decided institutional preservation mattered less than human connection. And Cassian almost followed all of them down paths that led to the same destination: competence without joy, authority without love, legacy without anyone who actually knew the person underneath the title. He chose differently, barely, clumsily, with backsliding and fear and constant temptation to retreat into what felt safer. But he chose differently. And that choice, that fragile commitment to trying something other than what he was raised to be, is the only inheritance worth passing to the child growing inside the woman sleeping beside him. The weeks that follow aren't dramatic, they're just life. The daily work of learning how to exist differently than patterns established over decades. Cassian catches himself defaulting to control, making decisions without consultation, treating Elowen like a variable to be managed instead of a partner to engage with. And she calls him on it, every time, not with anger but with firm redirection that refuses to accept less than actual partnership. He learns to ask instead of assume, to sit with uncertainty instead of demanding immediate resolution, to share the vulnerability of not knowing instead of performing certainty he doesn't feel. It's harder than any estate management challenge he's ever faced. It's also more rewarding than any successful harvest or profitable investment or political victory he's ever achieved. The trustees, newly appointed and carefully vetted for independence from family politics, manage the estate with competence that proves Pemberton's authority was preference, not necessity. The county magistrates review Marcus's case and hand down sentences that include prison time and permanent removal from succession consideration. Dr. Whitmore faces trial for attempted murder and loses his medical license, his career destroyed by choices made in moments of weakness and opportunity. The consequences ripple outward, touching everyone who participated in the web of deception. But Cassian finds he doesn't take satisfaction in their downfall. He just feels tired by how much damage people do to each other when they choose systems over humanity. Spring comes slowly, snow melting to reveal gardens that have been patiently waiting underneath. And Elowen's pregnancy progresses with the medical precision that confirms everything she's been saying about timing and paternity. Independent physicians examine and verify and document, not because Cassian demands it, but because establishing certainty removes ammunition from anyone who might try to challenge the heir's legitimacy later. The child is his. The mathematics are absolute. The doubt was manufactured. And Cassian learns to live with having chosen trust before the proof arrived, learns that the choosing mattered more than the eventual verification. On a morning in late April, with spring light flooding through windows that have been opened to let fresh air replace winter's staleness, Elowen goes into labor. It's not dramatic or dangerous, just the patient biological process of a body doing what it was designed to do. Cassian stays with her through all of it, holding her hand through contractions, offering water and encouragement, watching her be stronger than he knew humans could be. The midwife works with calm efficiency, and when the child finally arrives, slick and crying and impossibly small, Cassian feels something in his chest crack open that he didn't know was sealed shut. A daughter. 10 fingers, 10 toes, lungs that work beautifully based on the volume of her protest at being removed from warm darkness into cold light. The midwife places her on Elowen's chest, and Elowen looks down at her with exhaustion and wonder and fierce protectiveness all combined, and Cassian thinks this is what legacy actually looks like. Not estates or titles or accumulated wealth. This tiny human who'll grow up in a world they get to shape through their choices about what matters. He reaches out, touching one small fist that immediately grips his finger with surprising strength. and the weight of that grip is heavier than any responsibility he's ever carried. She's perfect. His voice breaks on the word. Elowen looks up at him, and her smile is tired and real. She's ours. Yes. And Cassian understands in that moment that ours is the most important word in any language, the thing that transforms possession into partnership and control, into collaboration and legacy, into something worth passing forward. They name her Arya, which means air and song and breath, all the things that make life possible beyond just survival. She's loud and demanding and completely indifferent to the aristocratic dignity expected of Valemont heirs, which Cassian finds more delightful than he has any framework for processing. The weeks after her birth are chaos disguised as routine. Sleep becomes theoretical. Conversation happens in fragments between feedings and changings, and the constant vigilance required to keep a tiny human alive. Cassian discovers that authority means nothing to someone who can't comprehend hierarchy, that control is impossible when the variables include biological functions that operate on their own schedule. That certainty is laughable when every day brings new developmental changes that render yesterday's knowledge obsolete. He's terrible at it initially, too rigid, too focused on systems when what's required is flexibility, too concerned with doing it right instead of just doing it adequately and adjusting as needed. But Elowen is patient, and Arya is forgiving in the way that babies are when you're trying your best, even if your best is clumsy. And gradually Cassian learns that being a father isn't about perfection. It's about presence, about showing up consistently even when you don't know what you're doing, about letting the child see you be human instead of just authoritative. One night, 3 months after Arya's birth, Cassian sits in the nursery holding his daughter while she sleeps against his chest, her breathing soft and steady, her small body warm and trusting. Elowen is asleep in their chambers, exhausted from a day of managing household matters and caring for an infant who's discovered the joy of staying awake when everyone else wants rest. The nursery is quiet, lit by a single lamp turned low, and Cassian looks down at Arya's face, still impossibly small, still changing daily as she grows into whoever she'll become. He thinks about his father, about the distance and discipline that defined his childhood, about the legacy of control that shaped him into someone who almost destroyed the best thing in his life because he was too afraid to be vulnerable. And he makes a promise, silent but absolute. He won't raise Arya the way he was raised. He won't teach her that emotion is weakness, or that control is strength, or that legacy matters more than connection. He'll let her be human. He'll show her that being strong includes being gentle, and being powerful includes being accountable, and being worthy of respect includes treating others as partners rather than subjects. He'll make mistakes. He'll backslide. He'll catch himself defaulting to patterns that feel safer than openness. But he'll try, every day, in small moments that build towards something different than what he inherited. And maybe that's the only legacy that actually matters. Not estates or titles or accumulated authority, just the choice to do better than the generation before, to learn from their failures instead of repeating them, to build something more human than the systems that shaped you. Arya stirs against him, making small noises, and Cassian adjusts his hold, supporting her head the way he's learned through repetition and correction, and patient teaching from Elowen and the midwife and anyone else willing to help him figure this out. The estate will continue existing. The Valemont name will persist. The legacy of power and influence will carry forward in whatever form the future requires. But right now, in this quiet moment in a nursery lit by lamplight, holding his daughter while she sleeps with the absolute trust that infants have before life teaches them to be cautious, Cassian thinks maybe the real measure of a man isn't what he controls, but what he chooses to protect. And he chooses this small human, this complicated woman sleeping down the hall, this fragile attempt at building something different than the fortress he inherited. Morning comes with pale light through windows that face east, and Arya wakes hungry and loud, and Cassian carries her to Elowen, who takes her with the practiced ease of someone who's learning alongside him what it means to keep another human alive and growing. They sit together in bed, Arya nursing while morning light grows stronger, and Elowen looks at Cassian with eyes that have seen him at his worst and are choosing to stay for whatever comes next. You didn't sleep. Couldn't. Too much thinking. About what? About how close I came to destroying this. About how many choices had to go differently for us to be sitting here right now. About how Marcus was right that I'll probably backslide into control when things feel uncertain. about how I have to actively choose this every day instead of defaulting to what feels safer. Elowen shifts Arya slightly, adjusting position, then looks back at him. You will backslide, and I'll call you on it. And you'll correct course, and we'll keep building forward despite the mistakes. That's what partnership looks like. Not perfection, just consistent choosing. I know. It's just harder than I want it to be. Most worthwhile things are. They sit in comfortable silence while Arya finishes eating and falls back into sleep with the sudden completeness that infants master, her small face relaxed and trusting. Cassian reaches out and touches her cheek, gentle, and the gesture carries everything he hasn't learned how to say yet about love and fear and hope, all tangled together. Elowen watches him with something like tenderness. You're going to be a good father. You already are. Imperfect, but trying. And trying is enough. How do you know? Because you're here. Because you didn't retreat into being Duke when things got hard. Because you're sitting in bed at dawn with your wife and daughter instead of in your study managing a state business. Because you chose this over certainty, presence over control, us over the systems that raised you. She reaches over and takes his hand. You're not your father, Cassian. You're not Marcus. You're not Pemberton. You're just you, learning how to be human despite being raised to be an institution. And that's all any of us can do. Learn. Adjust. Keep choosing what matters over what feels safe. The words settle into Cassian like warmth after long cold, and he thinks maybe this is what redemption looks like. Not dramatic transformation, not sudden enlightenment, just the daily work of choosing differently than your worst instincts, building slowly towards something better than what you inherited. Learning that strength includes vulnerability and power includes partnership and legacy is something you create through relationships, not just through maintaining systems. Years will pass. Arya will grow up watching her parents navigate the complexity of building a marriage that's actually partnership, an estate that's actually community, a legacy that's actually about people instead of just property. She'll see them make mistakes and correct them. She'll see them choose each other when defaulting to distance would be easier. She'll see them be human instead of just institutional. And maybe she'll learn from that something Cassian never learned from his own father, that being worthy of respect isn't about being perfect or untouchable or always in control. It's about being consistently present, reliably honest, courageously vulnerable, and willing to change when change is required. That's the inheritance worth passing forward. That's the legacy that actually matters. And sitting here in morning light with his wife and daughter, having survived conspiracy and doubt and his own worst instincts, Cassian Valemont finally understands that control was never strength. This is strength, sitting in uncertainty, choosing trust, being present despite fear, building forward on foundations you can't guarantee. This is what it means to actually live, instead of just exist inside systems designed to prevent exactly this kind of dangerous, necessary, beautiful human connection. The manor around them continues its patient work of housing life and legacy, all those corridors and chambers and architectural statements about permanence. But the manor isn't what matters. What matters is happening here, in this room, in this moment, in the choice two people make every day to keep building towards something better than what the past handed them. Outside the window, spring continues its work of bringing the estate back to life after winter's burial, revealing gardens and grounds that have been patiently waiting to grow again. And inside, three people exist together in the complicated, imperfect, absolutely essential work of being family instead of just dynasty, relationship instead of just arrangement, love instead of just legacy. That's the resolution. Not perfect, not certain, just real. And real, Cassian is learning, is enough.